across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And yes, good afternoon. Welcome to the home of common sense. 3 minutes after 1 o'clock. Thank you to Julia. She's back tomorrow. Labour accused of abandoning victims after scrapping 5 grooming gang inquiries in favour of, quote, a flexible approach. What the hell does that even mean? Allowing councils to run their own reviews. What is behind Labour's reluctance to hold grooming gang inquiries? Can you shine some light on that, please? Also this afternoon, stock markets continue to plunge worldwide as Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariffs kick in. The Bank of England warning of potential global financial crisis. Well, they're always a bit pessimistic over there at the BOE, are they not? I'm feeling rather optimistic about this. Details on the way. And a planned parade marking 80 years since VE Day has been scrapped by councillors who called it too elitist, telling residents to hold their own parties instead. You want to celebrate our brave from years gone by? Do it yourself. What kind of mad old messed up world are we living in? Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. So Labour being accused of a major U-turn over its pledge to set up 5 local inquiries into grooming gangs. Now, I can't really add anything here that hasn't been said many times, even just a few moments ago when I was chatting with Julia. Jess Phillips, I sort of got to know Jess a little bit when we were doing the TV stuff around about a year ago. She was a fairly regular face on my, I don't know, we did so many shows then, I can't remember which one it was, probably the nighttime show. Forgotten the name of it. And she would appear, and she was always very good. She was good balance, good sort of left-wing balance to whoever the right-wing guest was. But the standout point of Jess Phillips, she was, you know, working-class girl made good. I always tend to admire that, or usually in somebody. I think that's it's a bigger leap than many people make in the field of Westminster politics. So she gets a house point on that one. And her work on protection and highlighting issues around women and girls, particularly when it comes to domestic violence and sexual assault and goodness knows what else. She was up there along with Stella Creasy. I'd say they were probably 2 of the biggest, most powerful, compelling and absolutely crucial voices in this space, as the phrase goes. Nobody could have taken that away from Jess Phillips. For years, that was probably central to the kind of things she spoke about, felt most strongly and passionately about. So, yes, house points all round to Jess for that one. Then she got a job in the government. She became a Home Office minister, and she's decided to water down the inquiries into grooming. I mean, you really cannot make this stuff up. So given the opportunity, finally, after years, to give a proper voice, a full-blown localised inquiries. I mean, there's been a national, the J inquiry is kind of there for all to see. Baroness J looking at institutional failings of tens of thousands of victims across the country. But the localised ones were really crucial, because that, I think, is where some of the real stories, most of the real stories lay. And that would have been helpful. But she's now said, no, we're going to do it in a different way. In January, Yvette Cooper said she would launch inquiries working with Oldham Council and up to 4 other pilot areas where there have been concerns about grooming gangs. There are many more, by the way. This would have been backed by a £5 million fund. But the Minister, Jess Phillips, said that she stopped short of saying the 5 inquiries would still take place. I should tell you, she's still the Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls. I mean, you read of all the things, we use that phrase a lot, don't we? You couldn't make this up. I mean, seriously, this is beyond satire. She told MPs following feedback from local authorities, the fund will adopt a flexible approach to support both full independent local inquiries and more bespoke work, including local victims panels or locally led audits of the handling of historic cases. The Conservatives are calling for a national inquiry into grooming gangs. Tory MP and Shadow Minister Katie Lamb had this to say yesterday in the Commons. This is very powerful stuff. Have a listen to what the Shadow Minister said.
Why have ministers refused to establish a dedicated unit in the National Crime Agency to investigate councillors and officials accused of collusion and corruption? And I am sorry to say that that unit, Mr. Speaker, must also investigate police officers. In one case, the father of an abuse victim in Rotherham was arrested by South Yorkshire Police when he attempted to rescue his daughter from her abusers. He was detained twice in one night, while on the very same evening, his daughter was repeatedly assaulted and abused by a gang of men. It is clear these criminals were unafraid of law enforcement. In Kirklees, Judge Marson said, "You were seen with your victim on at least 3 occasions by the police. None of that deterred you, and you continued to rape her." How, without a national inquiry, can we know how and why these monsters enjoyed effective immunity for so long? And how can we be sure it will not happen again?
Jess Phillips was sitting opposite her when she was giving that very powerful statement. It went into more detail. Some of it we possibly wouldn't be able to broadcast at this time of day. But this is disturbing stuff for obvious reasons. Look, the whole game of whataboutery isn't usually helpful. It's rarely valid, but given that this is a story about institutional child abuse, you would be forced to wonder what the Labour response would be if we were talking about, for example, institutional racism. I mean, how many times have we heard that phrase? Or nearly always misplaced, but how often does it come up, whether you're talking about the police or the BBC or even the school curriculum, for goodness sake? Yet here we have a case of industrial-scale rape, abuse, death, suicide, human trafficking, sexual exploitation, systemic abuse, blind eyes, cover-ups, lost files and coordinated details from law enforcement to social services, counsellors and beyond. I mean, this is a horror show. But there's nothing to see here, Gov. And we aren't going to get full-blown, even localised inquiries now. The last time I looked, not a single person of all of those people that were involved, counsellors, various agencies, social, so whoever it happened to be, I don't think a single person, I'm not talking about the abusers here, I'm talking about the system, local authorities, those that would have been in charge, sometimes, curiously, laughably as it turns out, in charge of safeguarding. Nobody has walked the plank so far. Nobody has spent any time in a prison cell. Nobody has been questioned by the police. I don't know in the... If this was 1925, I could get it. I could go, OK, well, they didn't really have, like, systems and joined-up thinking. This is 2025, and although this goes back a few years, literally no one did anything wrong, according to this. It is an outrage. And the question, what is behind Labour's reluctance to hold these inquiries, is an absolutely reasonable one to throw at you today. 0344 499 1000. This is beyond outrageous. There really are no words to describe the ineptitude of this government. Are there any further lows they can hit in their already curious CV of hitting the bottom of the barrel on a regular basis? Our lines are open. Chloe Dobbs has joined us. Chloe, of course, is all about talking politics and the big stories of the day. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good as gold at this end. I mean, this one... I mean, where do you begin with this?
I know. I mean, when I saw this story yesterday, I mean, my jaw just dropped. I was so angry. I just thought, how dare they? I hoped that when I read into the detail after I saw the headline pop up on my phone, that maybe the headline was just exaggerated. They can't possibly, they can't possibly really ditch their commitments to looking into the grooming gangs. But no, I think this is really, really disappointing what they have done. What this means now is that local councils, like Bradford, for example, who don't want to be investigated because they know that there are people on those councils that will end up having to walk the plank. They don't want to embarrass themselves. They no longer have to be investigated. And I don't think that Jess Phillips really gets it, because when you had Robbie Moore MP, he stood up as well. I know the video of Katie Lamb has gone viral, but what I think was equally important was Robbie Moore stood up and he explained he's got people in his constituency, victims and campaigners, who are absolutely begging for the council there in Bradford to be investigated, but the council doesn't want to be investigated. And Jess Phillips, she stood up in response and said, oh, don't worry, the £5 million pot, it will be available if Bradford Council want to do an inquiry. And I'm thinking, did you not listen to a word the guy just said? He just said Bradford do not want to investigate themselves, so nothing will happen there unless the government forces it upon them. It's just shocking what they've done. And I think, you know, we were angry enough that we didn't get a proper national full inquiry out of the Labour government when there was a big push for it back in January. At least we got something, and we thought, OK, we've got this money for at least 5 decent-sized local inquiries, but they're not even going to bother with that anymore. And
it seems extraordinary. I touched on it, Chloe, just a second ago, that I can't think of any other single group of people that would be ignored in such a spectacular way. If this was, certainly if this was about race, I'm 100, and I wouldn't normally go there on this one, but I genuinely believe that if this was a racism, institutional racism issue, then all the stops would be pulled out. There would be the most thorough, the most outrage. You'd have all of those Labour MPs on the back benches standing up. Jess Phillips would be discombobulating. Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper would be melting into their own left-wing shoes at the idea, we're going to get to the bottom of this. We cannot live in this kind of society. He talks more about Islamophobia than he talks about the abuse of young white girls. I mean, it's extraordinary. And they're not even hiding it now.
I mean, there have been, I've been listening in a bit, and there have been a lot of callers calling in to this station today saying the same thing, which is, what if you flipped it around and it was white men abusing Pakistani young girls? There would be absolute outrage from MPs and from the Labour government, and this would be a huge thing. They'd be pouring money into it, right? But if it's white girls being abused, they're just not interested. I think that the left, they're kind of in denial. They don't think it's possible for people to be racist towards white people. I think, but I think these very much are. They are racist attacks. What happened to these young girls?
Yeah, I think actually
Labour just don't want to hear it.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? I think central. You know, people are trying to explore what are the specific reasons. You know, is it about something to do with religion? Did religion become the motivating factors? Did they believe they had a green light from their God or something? I actually think racism is the most accurate description in terms of motivation. These men saw Western working class white girls as trash. That is the dictionary definition of racism. They were better than them, therefore to abuse them meant nothing at all. You weren't crossing any lines because these were worthless girls anyway.
Yeah, and I think one thing that definitely needs to be investigated further is, was this more about religion or was this more about their Pakistani heritage? Because it is interesting, you know, a lot of people point out the fact that these abusers Muslims were very much overrepresented in the data. But why is it that they are specifically Pakistani Muslims? Why specifically that country? And apparently, you know, there's a specific region of Pakistan that they're predominantly from. I think we need to talk about that more, and we need to be able to talk about it. I think that the Labour Party, they're scared to talk about it. They want to potentially introduce Islamophobia laws. You've got, Jess Phillips. I think that she and other Labour MPs, they're more interested in saving their own jobs than they are doing what is morally right. Don't forget that Jess Phillips was nearly unseated by one of these independent pro-Gaza MPs. I think that she is worried.
And she got a right pasting, didn't she, on the campaign trail? Remember, there were some pretty ugly scenes, which even she wouldn't acknowledge what the problem was there.
Yeah, and then you saw Wes Streeting, who also, if you look at his general election result, it was on a knife edge with one of these independents. After we started talking about the grooming gangs again in January, he then came out and said that, we need to be more careful with the language that we use when we talk about the grooming gangs, trying to water it down, not trying to upset certain communities. He recently went to an event, I think it was called something like the Muslim Network or something like this, and gave a speech speech saying he doesn't think that Labour have done enough to support the Muslim community, and I just see them pandering more and more and more. 80 out of 89 of the seats where the Muslim population is more than double that of the national average are held by the Labour Party. I think that electorally they are very concerned about what would happen to them if they were to expose the fact that it is, you know, predominantly Muslim men committing these crimes, and for them to be the ones who initiate a proper inquiry into that. And I think they're also worried about the Labour Party's reputation if they see Labour councillor after Labour councillor named and shamed for covering up this mess.
100%, 100%. Speaking of strange things that go on in local authorities, the Lib Dems have been at it as well, for a very different reason. Lib Dem council rejecting plans for a military parade on VE Day, citing concerns over elitism. This is a borough council called Decorum Borough Council. I wasn't aware of decorum. I mean, it's ironic that they're called. There is little decorum, it seems, in Decorum Borough Council. Caroline Smith-Wright of Decorum Council encouraged community-led street parties, emphasising inclusivity over formal events like military parades. Elitism apparently is one of the I mean, really, who are these people? They walk amongst us, these half-wits.
I mean, I really don't know what was going through their heads. I don't know if they are just using this word elite as an excuse not to have to splash any of their tight pot of cash on a proper event for, you know, these veterans that sacrificed you know, their time and their hard work, and, you know, many very sadly died to defend this country. And also bear in mind the 75th anniversary, that was during COVID, and there wasn't really much celebration that could be done. So I think this 80th anniversary, we do need to make a big thing about it. And this council, they've said that having some sort of big splashy event would come across as elite, and to just have street parties instead would be more inclusive. You know, that word inclusivity comes out all the time.
I can
understand them using the word elite if it costs, you know, £1,000 to buy a ticket to go to the VE Day celebration, but I don't think it is something that would you'd be charged for entry.
But doesn't that show you, Chloe, where their kind of thinking is, the way their mind works? Oh no, it's some soldiers, a bit patriotic, it's got, you know, it might have some flags. That's elitist. No, you're an idiot. It's not elitist at all.
Yeah, they'll be all right if they fly a Palestinian flag instead, but bring out a British flag and oh no.
We are living in an upside-down world. Chloe Dobbs is with us. We'll have some more stories in just a couple of moments. And, of course, we're asking you that question. What is behind Labour's reluctance to hold grooming gang inquiries, and your general response to what the hell is happening to our government, our system, our elected parliamentarians? It's a mess out there. And at the moment, nobody seems to want to put it right. 0344 499 1000.
Firstly, this has happened in 50 towns. So 5 local inquiries is going to potentially give partial answers to 5 of those counts, but what about the other 45? Secondly, local inquiries have no statutory basis, which means they can't compel witnesses and they can't compel evidence. So, of course, if you are a councillor or a council official who's been complicit in these horrible crimes and you can't be compelled to go to an inquiry, you're not going to go.
What a surprise, yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We've got the political commentator Chloe Dobbs with us on the programme. We're looking at the all the big stories of the day, in particular focus on the lack of grooming gang inquiries. There was going to be 5 of these, and now Jess Phillips and the government have gone, well, yeah, probably not. They're just a kind of word salad of absolute nonsense dripping from the lips of the government benches on this one. They don't really care, to be honest. And in fact, their greatest emotion is one of fear, I think, when it comes to grooming gang inquiries. Let's look at some other stories, though, while Chloe is with us. The tech company who's had to apologise for posting a London job ad, which it's actually quite... You'd think this was just a bit of satire from the thick of it or something, which says only immigrants from India will be considered. This is Avante Technologies, based in Ilford. They've apologised after the ad specified only immigrants from India would be considered for the role. The ad included visa-related questions, sparking criticism for excluding UK-born applicants, and was labelled a mistake by the company. I don't know how you make a mistake doing that.
Yeah, they're saying that...
Quite a lot of wording there to be a mistake.
They've put out an apology that I think sounds like a complete load of lies. They're saying that this was a test, and I'm like, a test in what way?
Yeah.
Were you testing to see if your employees would go up in arms about this being on the job application, or whether they'd think, oh, that's absolutely fine just to only allow one ethnicity to apply? And they said that it was posted... The person who was doing this test, they posted it, and then straight away they went on holiday, which meant that apparently nobody else was able to take it down except them, which again sounds fishy. So that's the explanation. Fishy, I think that they are lying through their skin, to be honest. And I'm not really sure exactly what the motivation here was. I mean, maybe it's a company where the vast majority of them are Indian and they want someone who also speaks their language in the workplace. Because I had a look at the salary there, and I think it says 35 to 39k. So it wasn't as though they're trying to get sort of just cheap foreign labour that's willing to work
people
for
off the boats
18
in
to
Dover,
20k. You know, it's a decent salary.
Well, I think there's another point here as well. I think there's a bit of stereotyping, because there's parts of India where, tech students and tech, not even entrepreneurs, but people who work in that world are seen to be some of the best in the world, disproportionately contributing. I mean, that's a little bit like opening a corner shop and putting an ad out saying only Indians need apply, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of in that ballpark. If you're trying to suggest, well, because, we know that Indians are good at tech, what, and nobody else is? Nobody else might be good at the job?
Yeah, it's a bit strange, I mean, for example, I'm sure that if you go to an Indian takeaway, the vast majority of people cooking your meal are Indians because they're better at cooking Indian food, right? But if they put up a job advert...
That makes sense.
But if they put up a job advert, they don't need to put on it, only Indians are allowed to apply, right? I mean, it doesn't make sense. And can you imagine the outcry if they put, only white Brits allowed to apply for a job? Everyone would, call racism on it.
Well, you could really focus that down. Only people from Bromley are allowed to apply for the job, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe Scunthorpe.
Yeah, I mean,
2 places I know well. So
you see more and more of this where they try to work their way around the rules to pick people only from certain backgrounds. And this one, I don't know if it had some sort of DEI nonsense behind it. But if you look at Westminster Council, you may have seen some stories about them recently.
Don't even go there. I can't even start thinking about Westminster Council. because the leader of Westminster Council thinks he's living in South Africa in 1978.
I know.
He is South African, isn't he?
But, you know, their rules, I mean, do not bother applying there if you are a white man, because their rules say if you've got two candidates for a job and they are equally good, you have to pick one from a, not ethnic minority background, a global majority background.
That's the phrase
now. The lefties have cancelled their own terminology.
Yes.
Ethnic minority is offensive
majority.
now.
Yes.
And we have to say global majority, apparently.
Yeah. I don't know why you would choose to represent a country based on global statistics, because if you wanted to play that game across the board, you'd end up in all sorts of strange territory.
I'm going to say I'm an ethnic minority now. If they're saying that that the BAME community are the global majority, I'm going to start saying I'm an ethnic minority.
And you might start getting abuse for it.
Yeah.
Funny white girl. Let's move to this story. Cinema bosses plead with rowdy kids not to do viral TikTok stunt during Minecraft film. Now, I went to see the Minecraft film last night. Yeah, not on my own, with the kids. Cinema chain, including a Real Cinema in Fareham, are urging young audiences to avoid disruptive behaviour. There's been a bit of a viral trend involving teens chanting chicken jockey, tossing drinks, popcorn and water during the scene featuring a baby zombie riding on a chicken.
Oh dear, oh dear. I mean, hopefully there weren't any shenanigans when you went.
There weren't, but I tell you what did happen 3 times. People clapped at 3 different points in the film.
Must have been quite good then.
Well, no, it was just. I mean, it was kind of. It's a kids' film, but it's also got Jack Black in it, so it's very funny, and there's some. It's a bit like if you see a pantomime, you know, there's always a bit of humour for the adults as well as the kids. So it had a nod to a sort of an adult audience, and it was incredibly well made. It must have taken forever to make this thing, but people clapping because, you know, there was a stunt and everybody came out well at the end of the stunt. It's like, it's not live action. It's not a documentary. The actors aren't actually up there on the stage. It's a screen. Easily
impressed audience, clearly. But, I mean, look, I think the way I look at this is that we've got a general theme that kids these days are becoming more and more feral. They're not behaved. We're hearing more and more reports of kids attacking teachers at school. For example, when I see teenagers walking down the streets, they're normally up to no good. And these kids, they're willing to do anything to get their TikTok views. We had which shopping centre was it where the kids, they threw a stool from the top floor down to the bottom, and near, you know, they
which would have killed somebody.
They are lucky they didn't kill someone, but they were all happy that they got their viral TikTok moment, weren't they? So
we've got some footage of what's been happening in some cinemas with the Minecraft thing. This is for those who are watching rather than listening. You can see here what some of these characters are doing with their popcorn and their various other shenanigans. Well, we thought you could. There it is. So there's the movie. You can see what's happening in the film there. And just throw a load of popcorn. Do you know, when I was in the cinema yesterday, I was only thinking how horrendous it must be to hoover up a cinema of all places, because it's quite a little narrow, you know, you wouldn't get your Henry or your Dyson in there very easily. So somebody starts doing that kind of caper.
I did one time cause chaos in a cinema by I burst out laughing hysterically and accidentally spilt my popcorn everywhere. So I feel sorry for the cleaner that had to deal with that afterwards.
Which would have been fine, but she was watching The Elephant Man at the time, which is not really the response to that sort of movie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really quite understand why these kids are throwing popcorn around.
I don't know why.
Apparently there's a scene, I mean, you will have watched it, where they're fighting a zombie riding a chicken or something, and apparently that means the kids have got to throw popcorn around.
Well, I don't know who invented this.
I don't get
And also, don't clap at the end of films or during a film. It's not a theatre. It's up there with people who clap when a plane lands. Can I just say, when a plane lands, it's not an optional extra. You don't pay extra for the landing. You know, it is kind of part of the deal.
They'll probably do that on Ryanair soon.
Well, that's the last airline I was on, and nobody clapped at that landing. But it was fine, by the way. There was nothing wrong with it. Listen, Chloe, we're out of time. Thank you. Good to see you. Chloe Dobbs with us here on the programme. Over to you with that question. What is behind Labour's reluctance to hold grooming gang inquiries? 0344 499 1000. And your general reply to how you think this one has played out with the Labour Party and Jess Phillips and the various other bods involved in this. If you're in any of those local areas, you might even have a stronger view on this than others. Our lines are open. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is all about Labour dropping its pledge to fund 5 grooming gang inquiries, announcing the change just before Parliament's Easter recess, which is just another kind of unsavoury factor to all of this as well. It was only January when Yvette Cooper promised £5 million for 5 local investigations, but the money has now been turned into a flexible fund, whatever the heck that means. The government says it will still back inquiries if local authorities request them. Well, they should be compelled, frankly, to have some of these things. We know that Kate Lamb, the Conservative MP, gave a very impassioned address in Parliament declaring that victims, survivors and the public have been let down and deserve far better. Kate Lamb spoke a little earlier with Julia here on Talk. Let's have a listen to what she said.
That there are gangs of men, predominantly Asian, Muslim, either from Pakistan or of Pakistani heritage, who have sexually tortured over many years thousands of young white girls in this country. And without looking at everything that's happened all across Britain, how can we understand why this happened, whether it's still happening, which, if anything, I think is the most terrifying of all, and how to make sure it doesn't happen again?
Well, in a few moments, we'll chat to Georgina Halford-Hall, CEO of Whistleblowers UK. Also, Peter Garsden's going to join us, solicitor and president of Association of Child Abuse Lawyers. First, Robbie Moore, Tory MP for Keighley and Ilkley. Robbie, good afternoon to you.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I mentioned your colleague Katie Lamb at the Dispatch Box yesterday with a very impassioned address. Equally, yourself, you were there on the benches trying to somehow, knock some sense into the Labour front bench, which seemed to be closed and impenetrable to any sort of logic. This would be bizarre given the circumstances of this, Robbie, at any time. But when the person you're talking to is literally the minister in charge of safeguarding women and girls, it takes things to a whole new level.
Yeah, look, yesterday was completely infuriating. I was deeply frustrated at the lack of announcement yesterday, and this comes on the back of a promise that was given by the Home Secretary only back in January earlier this year, that there would be a additional 5 local inquiries backed by £5 million that would assist those local inquiries taking place. Now, I represent Keighley within the Bradford district area. I have consistently called since being elected the Member of Parliament here back in 2019 for a inquiry across the Bradford district. Why? Because I fear that the scale of the issue of gang rape, child sexual exploitation will far dwarf that in the scale of Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, and where else we've had. And for been campaigning on this, but we have not had any reassurance at all from the government that the Bradford district will have the local inquiry that the many thousands of my constituents want one and have been advocating for one.
And as I understand it, you were left with really the answer, well, it's up to them.
Yeah, look, it's really frustrating because I have a local authority who had the opportunity on voting on this, Bradford Council, only about 6 weeks ago. There was a motion put forward at full council, but yet Labour voted it down. Labour voted not to have an inquiry at a local level on Bradford Council. And then we have the government not willing to instigate a inquiry at a national level. Now, that is incredibly infuriating for the many victims, the many survivors that I've spoken to consistently over the last 5 years.
We can all take guesses on this, Robbie, but what is your assessment of Bradford Council not wanting an investigation into this?
Well, I suspect it'll be incredibly damning on themselves, and we know it will be. We know that the council have failed in their safeguarding responsibilities for a number of decades. It will not be good reading for them, and that is exactly why they do not want this to happen. And secondly, dare I say, it will be because of not wanting to stir up racial tension. I represent a constituency that has approximately 15% predominantly British Pakistani Kashmiris. I have been very consistent in saying in the House of Commons chamber that it is, if you look at the stats across the Keighley and Bradford district, it is a minority of British Pakistani men that have been targeting predominantly white young children, and yet Bradford Council, who will not yet on the back of this will not instigate this inquiry, and it is deeply, deeply frustrating.
Indeed. Well, listen, Robbie, good luck with continuing to push on this. I know you will. Robbie Moore is the Tory MP for Keighley and Ilkley. He wants that inquiry. It's his neck of the woods where one of these locations is. He's looking at it. They're saying, no, we don't really want one. There's no proper pressure from the government. The government are saying it's all quite flexible. There's a few quid being thrown at it, but, you know, this will be up to individual local authorities. Let's speak to Peter Garsden, solicitor and president of Association of Child Abuse Lawyers. Peter, good afternoon to you, sir. Nice to have you with us. I mean, this is troubling, isn't it? It's troubling on a number of levels. That's the only word I can really think of, or polite word I can really think of, as to what is going on here. I mean, it's quite clear there is a body of evidence and enough stories and statements from the National J inquiry that would clearly throw up in anybody's book. You might think this needs to be investigated further, and particularly at local level, where it's quite obvious that in some areas those that should have known better, those in positions of power or authority, were complicit in what happened.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think the first question is, should it be a local inquiry or a national or a public inquiry? There's no doubt in my mind it should be a public inquiry, and there are several reasons for that. It is a national problem. It's not a local problem. I understand that there are as many as 50 potential local authorities that could have this local inquiry. I mean, 5 were chosen, but there are many more. So it makes sense. There are several public questions to consider at a public inquiry. In particular, you know, the link between the Muslim British Pakistanis and this problem. Why local authorities don't seem to be able to deal with it effectively. Links between local authorities and these grooming gangs, problems with police prosecutions. So these are common problems that should be examined at a public inquiry. And has been said, there are various advantages of a public inquiry. The first being that it's run by a judge and he can compel the disclosure of documents. Secondly, he can compel the attendance of witnesses. And thirdly, and most importantly, probably, there can be representation for the victims at the hearing by lawyers. And whilst that costs money, it's important to underline that a lot of the victims of this type of abuse are very vulnerable. They lack trust in authority, and they lack literary skills. So they need representation. Because the danger is that if they haven't got that representation, they may not be willing to come forward at all. And it's already been underlined that if you have a local authority where there are links between the abuse and the grooming and the officers of the council, they're not going to want a public inquiry in the first place because it will examine their misdeeds. Secondly, they probably wouldn't attend to give evidence anyway if it's voluntary. So for all those reasons, what the government appear to have done is that they've tried to create a public inquiry by having this overall analysis by a KC and provided some funding to give it the semblance of a public inquiry. But it would be a lot simpler if they just announced the public inquiry and then they could choose the various areas they want to look at to examine the problems.
It seems extraordinary that there are some fairly high-profile examples. I mean, there are thousands, I'm sure, but there's obvious ones that we've all read about, you know, the police turning up at a house and there being young teenage girls in the house who were then arrested for being drunk and disorderly, despite the fact that young teenage girls are in a house of adult males, a number of adult males. Nothing happened to them. We've had cases where somebody reported abuse and then they were sent off onto a racial awareness course because they dared to sort of mention the ethnicity of the alleged offenders, etc. There are so many of these sort of anecdotal stories, and they, of course, are more than anecdotal, because many of these have been given a level of publicity, but nobody so far has been. I mean, on the first story I just mentioned there, you know, the police turning up at a house and arresting girls for being drunk and disorderly. I mean, why has nobody been brought to book on that? Surely that's but by anybody's measure, that cannot be the correct approach to a situation like that.
Well, absolutely. But before that can happen, there has to be the initiative for an investigation.
Of course.
And a public inquiry would be an ideal opportunity to flesh out this sort of evidence, to find out why the prosecutions haven't taken place, why the local authority haven't been more proactive. Yeah. And that could lead then to further action on the basis of the evidence given.
Yeah. Well, we will watch with interest, and let's hope the pressure is kept up, Peter. But thank you for joining us, Peter Garsden, solicitor and president of Association of Child Abuse Lawyers. Let's get a word also from Georgina Halford-Hall, CEO at Whistleblowers UK. Georgina, good to have you with us. I mean, this is a tricky one. You know all about whistleblowing and how this can work. Is that ultimately the only way we are going to get any kind of publicity shed onto some of the outrageous behaviour from authorities, individuals, politicians, social workers, whoever it happened to be? There is clearly a body of evidence of wrongdoing here and cover-up as well. If we can't get it through an inquiry, what options are left to those affected?
Well, thank you again, Ian, for inviting me. It's lovely to see you. Whistleblowers are absolutely at the heart of all of this. All of the evidence that we've seen so far from Rotherham, Rochdale, Oldham, everywhere in the country, it hasn't been a government department that's brought it forward. It's people who work for it or within the structures who've identified the wrongdoing and they've brought it forward. And they've been forced by the press, people like you, to take action. And that's where this whole system is going wrong. As you know, we're campaigning for an independent office of the whistleblower, and later this month, our bill is going back to the floor of the Commons for an independent office. Yeah. If people don't have a safe space to speak up, this is never going to be resolved. And, you know, dare I say that this government has promised a lot, so did the last, and they've all made a lot of noise through inquiries, but nothing comes from them. I'm not anti-inquiry. I think we need to look at the structures around it that have failed whistleblowers and failed victims, but we also need to address the thousands of victims who are awaiting compensation, the thousands of whistleblowers who are waiting to go through an employment tribunal where they're forced to look for compensation. This is bonkers. Yeah. More taxpayers' money being wasted, whereas we could have one overarching organisation that captures all the evidence, passes it to the right department, and the government can make sure they do their jobs properly.
Well, you'd like to think that this would be a fairly straightforward setup, wouldn't you? I mean, it's not as if we're starting from scratch here. You know, we've got already thousands of victims. We know that there have been massive shortcomings in local authorities and beyond. Everything is there for this to happen and go ahead. And yet there are some pretty, I don't know whether they're powerful or what they are, but some pretty strong voices who seem to want to shut this thing up.
Well, I think the problem is that the buck stops with the government, and then from that the buck goes down to the police and all the other agencies and organisations who over tens of years have completely and utterly failed. Yeah. You know, child rapists, let's call them what they are, they need to be apprehended now. And it doesn't matter what their ethnicity is. This is about anybody who breaks the law. They need to be taken off our streets. And Jess Phillips has talked, and I admire Jess Phillips, about mandatory reporting, but that's not going to create a culture of openness and honesty. And it's certainly not going to solve the problem, because whistleblowers are just going to be given an additional level of fear. You know, they're doomed if they do speak up, doomed if they don't, because they have got nowhere safe. Nobody is championing whistleblowers. You know, we look to Baroness Kramer, who keeps bringing this bill forward, and we now need the government to get a grip and do the same thing, because every single citizen needs the safety net of somewhere to go to if the police aren't talking to them. Let me just say, we've had dozens of police officers come to us in recent weeks. I don't know what has prompted this upturn, and social workers. I was talking to one earlier this morning who've all been reporting, in effect, criminal offences that are being caused by people who wear police uniforms or work for social services, not because they're assaulting people or children, but they're actually failing to report it or don't 100%. Want to report it. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what we're told about the culture's changed. The culture hasn't changed.
Nope.
And police officers are still being arrested for doing their job in the same way that I was. We should not live in fear because we report wrongdoing. We should actually expect people to take it and actually take action. Hillsborough Law, we're supporting Hillsborough Law, they're supporting us. Duty of candour has to mean something, but it cannot mean anything unless those who actually use their duty of candour are protected from retaliation. You only have to go to our employment tribunals to see all of the dozens of cases and how badly people have been treated, and we just lose sight of what is going wrong.
Well, listen, Georgina, they are very powerful words, and everything you say, I think, is echoed and agreed with at this end. I wish you luck in everything you're doing with this campaign and others. Georgina Halford-Hall, CEO at Whistleblowers UK. You can hear, I mean, it's so ridiculous, this. If this was any other scenario, it would just be laughable. If somebody was saying, well, you know, it'd be quite hard to do this because we don't know who the victims are and we've got no idea where this happened. We don't know what people were involved in. We know all of this. We know all of this stuff. We've got the victims. We've got the local authorities. We've got the locations. We've got all of this data. We just need to be able to winkle out the wrongdoers, those that covered stuff up, those that were happy because they were so terrified or petrified of being accused of an ism or told that this was bad for social cohesion or whatever other bizarre, crazy, obscene, perverted reason they might have for not wanting to enthusiastically pursue an abuser of young girls who went to sleep at night knowing they had decided their behaviour, their response, their decision covered up the justice that a young girl might get for being abused, trafficked, raped, attacked, not just on one single occasion, but on thousands of them. We already know most of this stuff. So an inquiry isn't starting from, this is not needle in a haystack territory, kids. 0344 499 1000.
This is right back to the old Labour ways of saying now is a good time to bury bad news. As everybody's leaving Parliament to go away, this is not the time. Then you make an announcement like this. It's so obvious. First of all, it's an abuse of Parliament. It's also an abuse of a really serious issue. I am putting down today a Freedom of Information request of the government to tell us what information did they receive from the councils that so made them change their policy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This from John in Great Ellingham, who says, who is Jess Phillips safeguarding here? Certainly not white girls. She is a disgrace to her sex and her role. And her role is, of course, Minister for Safeguarding. It shouldn't be funny, but that you can't help but sort of grin and smirk and almost howl at the idea that the safeguarding minister is not enthusiastically advocating for as many localised inquiries as you can get into this. Let's speak to Jez in Aldershot on this point. It's interesting, Jez, you're in Aldershot, a point on, I know you have your own really awful experience of grooming gangs because of your own family. Tell us a little more, but predominantly, just to begin with, this isn't something that just happens in the north of England.
Yeah, hi Ian, Jez here, based near Aldershot. Yeah, my daughter probably about 6 years ago got involved with grooming gangs. Massive difference in behaviour, lots of drink. They were people based from Woking, Pakistani Muslim men in Woking, which is probably about 7 or 8 miles away from Aldershot. But I think these people prowl around, cruise around the local areas in taxis and things, looking for young girls. I mean, it disrupted the family massively at the time. We got the police involved, and to be fair, they were about as useful as a chocolate fireguard.
Wow.
But
what age was your daughter at this stage?
My daughter at that stage was 17, so she wasn't as young as a lot of these people.
Well, even so, an offence is an offence, isn't it?
Yeah. She'd gone to a New Year's Eve party and met a Somalian girl. And this Somalian girl sort of introduced her, I think, to these, well, they're rape gangs, aren't they? They're not grooming gangs, so... Yeah. I mean, it turned out it was horrendous for my ex-wife. They were threatened in the house by Muslim men, and then in the end, after the police were called, this had been going on for probably about 6 months. Stopping out all night. Instagram pictures of her sort of in what looked like quite wealthy people's houses. So, I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of what totally went on, but I think people can guess. Yeah. And then at the end of the day, after the police were called, they said that they would sort of investigate, and then they came back to us after a while, said that they couldn't really push it. They would just maybe go for a stalking charge. I mean, that's useless.
Why couldn't they push this?
Because they said even text messages that we showed them, they couldn't. They said they wouldn't relate them to other people. They said that other people could have sent threatening text messages to the family.
Here's the thing, though, Jez. I mean, there's many takeaways from what you're saying here, but this happened after we were already. You're saying this is about 6 years ago. So by that stage, we were already aware of allegations of cover-ups of these gangs. So at that stage, this was not... Some of these gangs go back 20 years, maybe more. This was 6 years ago when the headlines that we're discussing today were already out there. So you might think that the police or any other authority would go, oh, my God, we don't want to be one of those people that get caught in this denial thing. We'll really act on this. But they didn't.
No. And then finally, in the end, when we got back to the police to find out what was going on, the classic line that is wheeled out every day is the fact that they said that the fella was suffering mental health issues.
What?
And they weren't going to pursue it.
Oh, wow. Oh, poor guy.
Yeah, suffering mental health issues, and it's so... that made me so angry, and the police actually said to me that if I took the law into my own hands, because I was so angry now, they knew that it would be me they'd come for, the police.
I mean, that's just the icing on the cake of injustice, isn't it? That not only, if you dare, as the victim's father, get angry, we won't do anything about the perpetrator or the potential rapist or abuser, but we'll come for you if you get angry.
Oh, and then the final nail for me, probably a couple of months before the general election last year, I sat down with the prospective Labour MP, Alex Baker, and Gareth Williams and Sophie Porter, who are the head of the council and the second head of the council, talked about this at great length, and she assured me, Alex Baker, that once Labour were in power, she'd be investigating this, and she'd be back to me and she'd want to talk to me, but of course brushed under the carpet since then. I haven't heard one phone call from her.
Oh, for goodness sake. Jez, listen, I wish you... I have to cut in because we're about to hit the news, but we will speak again on this, I'm sure, because it would be fascinating is not perhaps the right word. It would be really interesting to see if this does progress in any positive way. But harrowing to think that even as recent as 6 years ago, there were still big old barriers thrown up on this one. What is behind Labour's reluctance to hold these full-blown inquiries? Our lines are open. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. 3 minutes after 2 o'clock. As we've been discussing, Labour have been accused of abandoning victims after scrapping 5 grooming gang inquiries in favour of what they call a more flexible approach, allowing councils to run their own reviews, or, to put it another way, marking their own homework. Details on that, we're taking your calls too. We've spoken to some pretty powerful voices in the last hour. I want to hear what you have to say on that. What is behind Labour's reluctance to hold these inquiries? Also this afternoon, stock markets have plunged worldwide as Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariffs kick in. The Bank of England warning a potential global financial crisis. I mean, I wouldn't Look, they're not the Oracle of Delphi. If the Bank of England say it, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. They're a bit pessimistic over there at the BOE. I'm feeling quite optimistic this week. Details to come, and negotiations to end the ongoing bin strike in Birmingham have failed again, leaving residents with growing piles of rubbish outside their homes and no clear solution in sight. What have you got? About 18,000 tonnes of rubbish. Rats the size of buffaloes. Yeah, it was cats, but now they've eaten a little bit more. They've gone buffalo bound. Those feline, pesky feline, food-based, dirty vermin, scrounging things. Nobody likes a rat outside their own house. We'll have more on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word from Theo Ushwood, political commentator. I don't know whether we're talking about rats, Theo, in our bit here.
Oh, wait, no, it's not listed. I think you've got
it's
a rat
not
guest.
listed.
I think you've got a rat guest at 2:30, but I can talk to you about rats.
We have got. Do you know anything about rats?
No, apart from the fact I hate them.
Do you hate them?
I'm sure rats have never done anything wrong by me.
Well, it used to be fodder for cats, didn't it? Which is the point I was trying to get to there. It was, but now the rats are bigger than the cats.
The rats are bigger than the cats. You're going to need.
So it's the other way around.
What I have seen is that you can get terriers. Terriers are very good at killing rats.
Yeah, they'll
and they have. You can bring in terriers to kill if you have a population of rats. But I wouldn't even. I don't know the size of a pack of terriers you'd need to get through Birmingham, because it's in a disgraceful situation. Look, make no mistake about it. The reason we're in this position is because the government won't stand up to the trade unions.
My cousin was working on a farm, and he said, what was the name of the guy? It was something like Basil the Rat Exterminator or something.
Yeah.
And they, in barns, obviously, in the countryside and area, you get sort of rats, and they tried, all sorts, but they were told to try all sorts. But they knew, being country people, the only thing that really does it, forget your shotgun, is a couple of terriers. Stick them in the barn.
Yeah.
And then they'll
have you ever seen it? They sort of shake them furiously. They grab the rat by the neck
literally,
and they sort of shake them.
Yeah.
It's not a huge...
I might reenact it.
It's pretty... It's not particularly savoury for the rat.
I think it's quite quick, oddly.
Yeah.
Bizarrely, I think it is quite quick.
But of course the problem is in Birmingham. I mean, in the countryside it's one thing, but in Birmingham, I mean, they're spreading disease, and the fear has to be that there's going to be some sort of widespread outbreak of some horrendous disease as a result of the fact this rubbish has been piling up, and we've now got rats and all sorts of other vermin. And it's the government hasn't the best we've had is Wes Streeting, the health secretary.
Yeah, he got a bit animated.
Getting animated yesterday, but this is sort of week 6 of these strikes.
Well, it's outrageous. This is back to the, I said to somebody yesterday...
Winter of discontent.
Well, yeah, even if people don't remember it themselves, I barely do, but we're all aware of what happened in the 70s. You couldn't bury the dead, you couldn't empty your bin, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we're there.
Yes.
We're literally there.
Yeah, we're there. And, the Unite are threatening that this could hit other towns and cities. Ultimately the only way out of it, and Labour aren't going to do this because it would mean introducing an anti-trade union law, is to bracket the bin men and women in the same, give them the same status as the police when it comes to going out on strike and other emergency services. You just say, very sorry, your service is so crucial to public health. We're now going to legislate that means you can't go out on strike if you want to secure better pay, because this has gone on for far too long. But of course that won't happen, and it's very difficult to see how the impasse is going to be breached.
Yeah. Let's move to the big story we're discussing, Theo. I mean, rather extraordinary that we are sort of back in this same position of try to get inquiries up and running, even at a local level. There's been the J inquiry, of course, which some people said was, that it was thorough in many places, but in order to get to some of the areas where there are still huge questions, you need to go local. There was always been, I've been reading about this for years. I think it was about 15 years ago. I remember first interviewing somebody who talked about this, and it predates even that. And as big as the abuse itself is the other part of the story, which is the kind of the cover-up, not the cover-up from the bloke that lives next door, the cover-up from the councils, the cover-up from social services, the cover-up from law enforcement. I mean, there's enough already. You know, we've seen select committees where they've looked at this a little bit. There's enough. There's more than, you know, more than anecdotal evidence of, like, something is clearly wrong. And the only way you're really going to get to the bottom of that is through thorough local inquiries.
Well, you'd hope there'd be a big national inquiry. The government rejected that, right? But they set aside this money when we had, you know, when this story resurfaced at the turn of the year, and they're going to provide this money, this £5 million quid to support local councils to hold inquiries into exactly what had gone on. And this was the really cynical thing. 45 minutes before Parliament broke up last night, the Home Office Minister, Jess Phillips, comes before the House of Commons and says, no, we're not going to do the inquiries, we're just going to give the money out. And don't be surprised, you know, a few weeks' time, you know, council will say, OK, well, we're taking the money, and guess what? Nothing to see here. They can spend the money how they like, on what they like, as long as it's, of course, related to panels. But they're not going to be holding any of these inquiries to try and get to the bottom of exactly what happened. Katie Lamb, she was on with Julia earlier, I saw.
She was,
the Shadow Home Office Minister. That was a first-class bit of oppositioning yesterday in the House of Commons, calling out the government for what they did. And of course, we called it, when I was a parliamentary reporter, parliamentary editor, we'd call the last day of term the day when you throw out the trash, right? You get all of the things you don't want to talk about, all of the difficult announcements, the thorny announcements, the thing that could be embarrassing, like burying bad news, and you put it all out in one big go on the last day of the parliamentary term, because you don't want MPs hanging around to scrutinise it for any length of time. You don't want them on the WhatsApps getting together an urgent question or actually trying to hold ministers to account. You want them to all go away from holiday, not to talk about it, come back in 2 weeks' time at the local elections, and just to pretend it never happened. And I just think that was such a you know, the most important thing, protecting our children from these rape grooming gangs. We need, you know, Parliament was at its, and this Labour government was at its absolute worst yesterday. And I tell you something, if you know, I'm not one to make a prediction about what the election result is in 4 years' time, right? Crystal balls and all that, you know, a fool would place a bet. But should it turn out that Labour suffer a heavy defeat, and we see the rise of Nigel Farage's Reform Party potentially colliding with, you know, resurgence of Conservative voters, and they come together and they knock Labour out of power, it will go back to this kind of decision making. Labour were out of power for 14 years. 14 years, that's a long time to be out of power. And I just find it astonishing that actually, having been given the responsibility by the voters, like it or not, that was the result last July, to come back in and start running things after Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and all the rest of it, actually being given the responsibility to come back into government and run the country, to turn around with such cynicism and make this kind of call just beggars belief. And there is, and not unreasonably, a lot of speculation that many of the heads that would roll, or the individuals that might be identified in, let's put it politely, in shortcomings in how this was dealt with, others would suggest, you know, frankly criminal, but many of those people will be Labour councillors. And you only need to start to get into double digits for it to become a huge problem for the government that would not be forgotten in 4 years' time. If we discover there's, you know, 100 Labour councillors or those that work in Labour administrations that have been remiss in their job, look, there's Labour councillors, sure, on the one hand, but people have already been convicted of crimes, and this is looking at the way local authorities were run. And yes, many of those local authorities will have been Labour run or would have been Labour controlled. But having said that, you know, the civil servants, the social workers who failed the victims so abysmally, weren't affiliated to any political party. And to your other point, I would just say, you know, I also think that, you know, voters would understand if Labour came in and took a hard line and supported the inquiries to get to the bottom of what happened, and then actually dealt with the problems, rather than, as we now seen, the perception they're just, and they are sweeping it under the carpet. And they're going to reap a whirlwind from this in those parts of the country. And I also saw an interesting piece of commentary And of course, obviously people are talking about the heritage of many of the perpetrators, in fact, Muslim, Pakistani. There are also, and I would say this, and it was an interesting bit of commentary, that by simply not wanting to talk about it because of the racial element, you make the situation worse, you make the divisions worse. And there are, of course, many, many Muslim families up and down the country who will have looked at those crimes with would condemn them completely, would look at what's happened with utter abhorrence and just be appalled at what's happened. And rather than just saying, actually, there is this element to it and we're going to call it out and we're going to deal with it, actually you just entrench the belief that it is everybody within that community, and it is not. And I think it is, you can sometimes, you make the situation so much worse when you don't talk about something because you think you're going to be condemned as being racist. And actually, if you can have the honest conversation and have it in an open and plain speaking way, that means that actually, without necessarily pointing fingers at a particular community, that actually does that, the community that is affected in this instance a huge favour, because 100%. Then those people who absolutely abhor these crimes can come out and say so.
Well, indeed. And when we were identifying Catholic priests as abusers in the Catholic Church, nobody thought that every Catholic was an abuser, or even every Catholic priest was an abuser. But it was right that, we didn't suddenly go, oh, coincidentally, they all happen to be Catholic priests. When there's disproportionate amount of numbers and the abuse was off the scale, globally, it was in another stratosphere. It was right that we identified that aspect of the perpetrators.
And like with the Church of England. And the Church of England, actually, it's interesting because it's the Church of England and the scale of the child abuse, abuse of children within the Church of England. And actually, by I think it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's the Bishop of Newcastle who's come out and at every turn called out the Archbishop of Canterbury, questioned the Archbishop Stephen Cotterill and said, hang on a moment, is this the right person to lead the church? That actually, the Church of England is in disarray now, but can you actually have confidence because of what the Bishop of Newcastle has done and spoken up and spoken about it and held those individuals accountable? I think at least the Church of England has a fighting chance of getting back on its feet, because you've got somebody in there saying... Senior people saying, we have got a problem and we've got to deal with it. That is not to any way, try and undermine what's happened. It's appalling what's happened. And the leadership in the Church of England has been appalling. This is a specific example from Justin Welby, who even joked about his resignation in the House of Lords speech. But at least when you've got that whistleblower in the Church of England saying, hang on a moment, we're going to look really carefully at how we deal with, who's taking over and how we're going to deal with this, you can at least, people can have some sort of faith that when it finally comes to picking the next leader of the church, the next Archbishop of Canterbury, that actually they may be able to turn around.
Absolutely spot on. We're going to talk more about that with you as well in a couple of moments' time. More calls on the way. We're bound to mention China hitting back on the Trump tariffs. We kind of knew this was going to happen, Theo. They come back with the figure of 80... It's like a quiz show, isn't it? 84%.
Okay.
There's a little, a little bell goes, and we realise there now... I'm in danger of kind of tariff fog because I'm trying to now work out what this specifically means. It's going to cost more, to import American goods into China and vice versa. We know that 84% going that way, 110% going that way, whatever the heck it is. At any point, does this cancel each other out? That's the sort of my economic brain is trying to work out what the problem is.
The problem is that China, because it is much cheaper to produce goods in China,
you don't have to pay anybody, just use slaves.
Or people very akin to slave labour being paid so little that it doesn't count. The trade surplus is with China. They're running the trade surplus because the majority of goods are going only in one direction, and that's from China into the United States. And of course, China are retaliating because they're panicking. These tariffs of 104% that Donald Trump has introduced are going to, I've seen one figure is going to hit the GDP figures, growth figures by 3%. I mean, the Chinese are in real trouble with this. And of course, there's going to be a knock-on impact for the American consumer in terms of higher prices, particularly firms like sportswear companies. I was looking at Nike's share price. I mean, it's down, 10% or something like that in the last few days, because of course they make many of their products in the Far East and then ship them over to the United States and to the rest of Europe, of course, to sell. There is.
I've got to cancel the Air Jordans that I've just ordered. Is that what you're telling me?
They're going to get. Well, I think actually, funnily enough, your Air Jordans might get cheaper, because we're not going to. Your Air Jordans in this country might get cheaper.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you wear Air Jordans?
Well, I'm looked at by the youth,
the midlife crisis,
and say but we only wear them when they see what I've got.
But funnily enough, all those Air Jordans that are being made in China or wherever, they're not going to get into the United States now, or they're going to sell fewer of them in the United States because of the tariffs until Nike or I'm picking up a bit unfairly on them. There are plenty of American or other sportswear companies that operate and have factories in the Far East. But until they bring their factories into the United States in order to avoid the tariffs, and of course they'll cost more because they're going to be produced and there's going to be higher labour costs and manufacturing costs in the United States. But actually, until that happens, there's going to be a surplus of these products that have to go somewhere, and they may well end up here. Yeah. And Rachel Reeves was quite specific yesterday when she said, the Chancellor said, she didn't back calls to buy British, i.e. you can buy other products. She was very clear.
Don't pen ourselves in, or don't be self-facing or something.
And she was very clear that she didn't think things like quotas on goods from the rest of the world was the way to go. She didn't want any further tariffs. So it may well be that in the short term, the price of some products that were destined for the US market now coming to the UK will mean there's a supply side splurge, for want of a better expression. Actually, prices go down.
For the record, I don't wear Air Jordans, by the way. My little boy quite likes them. So when you were at school, Adidas, Nike, Gola, what was the
other one?
Do you remember Green Flash?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I think you got bullied for wearing Green Flash.
I think you did, yeah. Well, that was just us two then, wasn't it?
I think I was very proud. I once got a pair of Nike trainers. I think my mum made me save up pocket money. I think I only got to about 10.
Really?
Yeah. She was fire.
She was brutal like that.
Brutal, yeah.
Yeah, but
actually, it worked. Yeah. Look, I'm here speaking to you now.
Exactly. And also an international ambassador for Nike. Theo, would be a bad gig, wouldn't it, really? Theo, good to see you. Theo Ushwood with us here on Talk. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. We'll take some calls in just a second if you're hanging on. Chris, Ian, Claire, Melanie, Brenda, Georgina, Matt and others will be with you guys. We are the voice of the nation. We are the voice of common sense. Calls coming up next here on Talk.
This is right back to the old Labour ways of saying now is a good time to bury bad news. As everybody's leaving Parliament to go away, this is not the time then you make an announcement like this. It's so obvious. First of all, it's an abuse of Parliament. It's also an abuse of a really serious issue. I am putting down today a Freedom of Information request of the government to tell us what information did they receive from the councils that so made them change their policy.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
This one from Chris in Reigate. It says, I hear Keir Starling has just finished modelling for Madame Tussauds, and sources tell me his waxworks looks more lifelike than he does. The man has the charisma of a rat, and so maybe he could sort this bins problem out in Birmingham. He should fit in well, as he's just as the rubbish piling up, says Chris. It's just kind of extraordinary, isn't it, that we have almost the most stereotypical visual example of what went wrong with Labour last time they were, the Socialists were in power. I mean, we gave Blair a little bit of, we cut him a bit of slack at the beginning because he wasn't quite the sort of mad socialist. There are arguments that actually he was underneath it all. He might have been mad in other ways, but initially, 1997, he came in on a big old wave, and some of that wave was blue. But back in the day, when Callaghan and Wilson and co were running, I mean, these people were absolutely mad. They were pathologically nuts. I mean, literally. Socialism is an illness. I hope most people are aware of that. It exists solely to make you feel better about yourself. I mean, that's the kind of madness of socialism. It works on no level. There's no country or place in the world you can go, look, that's where it works brilliant. The socialist system, it's good. This is about self-flagellation, it's about guilt, it's often about revenge, it's about a lot of stuff. And you can have socialised elements to a system. Our NHS, our education would be examples of that. But the pure socialism that we hear from the mouths of many of our ministers, and I think Jess Phillips, who would probably on any ordinary day call herself a proud socialist, she has that illness, she would probably do so thinking it was a good thing to be. But actually, when you look at her approach to the grooming gang problem, the lack of inquiries, there you can begin to see the malaise of socialism in all its action. She cannot countenance the idea that these inquiries might throw up maybe more uncomfortable realities for Labour, for social cohesion, etc. That it's just unpalatable. That reigns supreme. That's more important than the justice, if you like. And that's the kind of mad world of that illness. Melanie is in Watford on grooming gangs. Afternoon to you, Melanie. What have you got for us?
Afternoon, Ian.
Hi.
I live in the Watford area. Mm-hmm. One of my best friends, her daughter, around the age of 14 onwards, was groomed. She was sucked into the grooming gangs. It started off with plying her with drink and teaching her how to steal credit cards and just generally get into, pretty naughty stuff. And then the drugs started. And she became fully on heroin and crack, and they just farmed her around for sex purposes. One day, my friend came home to her house to find 3 men sitting in her living room, waiting while her daughter was dealing with someone upstairs for their turn, and she went absolutely berserk, called the police, got the guys out of her house. The police didn't come. Nothing was ever done, and sorry, just to interject for a second, Millie. These men were waiting to go up into a bedroom with her. Yes, to have their turn. Yeah. Wow, these are adult men. She's 14. Yes, and a call to the police made no difference. Absolutely. And they were Pakistani men. And then thereafter, although she tried to help her daughter, but it was hopeless. From then on, the men would send a chauffeur-driven car to pick her up and take her to a hotel where she did the business. And she just got more and more ill with
her drug taking. And eventually, I think she outgrew her purpose for the men and was so heavily into drugs, she ended up living with a heroin dealer and having 3 children by him. Each one was born with a heroin addiction and had to be weaned off. Poor little souls. And after the first child was taken away from her by social services and fostered out, the next 2 were actually removed before they were even put into her arms in the delivery suite. So it's had a very, very long-lasting effect in her life. She's still trying to go to rehab, but just using it as a sort of crutch until the next fix.
And how old is she now, Melanie?
I think she's about 33
wow.
now.
So this has essentially blighted most of her teen years and all of her adult life.
Yeah, and my friend, who would be grandmother to those 3 children, doesn't have that. They've lost that. She fought quite desperately in court, but they couldn't be anywhere near her. It's so sad. Very bad. My friend's daughter had special educational needs, so she was absolutely ripe for the picking.
Which apparently is often not always, but yeah, you're right, so often the case. Melanie, that is incredibly powerful and incredibly distressing to hear that. But one of the saddest things I take away from that call is that doesn't actually. I'm not shocked in a curious way. It's shocking to hear somebody articulate it out loud who has been close to a story such as that, but it reflects the kind of pattern we've heard. How many of those cases do you have to have before Jess Phillips would go, I think this might be worth a real robust inquiry, a proper national inquiry that goes to where previous ones haven't gone, but certainly some localised inquiries? Well, I mean, how can you have a 14-year-old girl in a bedroom with an adult male and 3 other adult males downstairs waiting to go upstairs to have sex with a child and not get any kind of legal response from that when you... I mean, how? How is that even possible? This wasn't in... it's not a Dickensian story where all manner of horrendous abuse took place against particularly women and children, anyone who was vulnerable, and there were no laws or anything in place to protect that. This is, I mean, she said a friend, so 16 years ago. So, I mean, this is, in a modern era, 2009. This is like yesterday in relative terms. But it isn't surprising because we keep hearing it. So how shocking does it have to be before Jess Phillips or anyone else goes, do you know what, we're not, no, there is a problem here. We need to get to the bottom of it, because the smart money says half of these characters are still operating. Trying to stop this, by the way, just by giving it some publicity, is like trying to stop the drug trade because you once in a while nick a dealer. It ain't going to happen. It carries on because all of those that are perpetrators never bank on getting caught. If they are caught, they find a way out of it. They'll talk about lying, etc. And of course, the history of these particular instances of child abuse and grooming gangs tells us that the very people that should be solving it, catching the bad guys, addressing it, putting legislation in place, the very people that are responsible for all of that are actually complicit, either because some of them will be abusers themselves, others might have taken a drink for turning a blind eye, and others politically just think, I don't want to go there because this could look like I'm a racist. Really? You hear a story like Melanie's there? Man alive. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 25 to 3. Rob says you forgot Puma on your... That's a good point, actually. A Puma on your list of sports brands popular in the school playground. Gola were a bit lowbrow, don't you think? Yeah, they kind of... I mean, I was all about the Adidas. Some people go, Adidas, and then you come up with that thing. Do you remember that? Adidas? No, it's Adidas. And then, do you remember that in the playground? Somebody go, you know what Adidas stands for? Do you remember? All day I dream about sex. And how have we sniggered at that one? I don't know why. You could have made up probably loads of things that those letters stood for. Somebody does make the point about Air Jordans. Where was it? Mike, who tweeted me, who's 60, who says, I wear Air Jordans. I wear low tops. Do you think that's the distinction? Finn, you're 11. Is that the distinction between, like, is a low top okay, but a high top bad? So Finn says he would never wear a high top unless it's a boot. But then a full high top is kind of a boot, right? That's kind of a boot. I'm thinking. All right. So low top is okay because that's just a trainer. I mean, a trainer is a trainer, right? If it's got a little Nike tick on it and it's white, I don't think that smacks of youth or trying to be. So, John, Brian, whoever it was, I apologise. I can't find your tweet. Yeah, go for it. Wear them. But just don't wear baggy trousers. Because Finn, who's Soy Boy Finn, who's our assistant producer, recently bought a pair of trousers that, I'm not kidding you, were wider than the Mersey. I mean, these things, you could get probably all of us in one leg. These suckers are so... I've never seen anything like it in my life. I thought it was a marquee. He said, have you seen these? And he pulled out these trousers. He was so proud of his trousers. He said, have you seen these? Now, aren't they fantastic? I honestly thought he was going camping. There was no doubt in my head that this could only be utilised in some form of awning. But apparently not. It's how the cool kids roll. 0344 499 1000. It does make you sound a bit old, doesn't it, when you start talking about what younger people are wearing. And normally, I've got kids myself. I've got an 11-year-old. He's now kind of in that ballpark of being aware of what looks cool, what doesn't look cool, and things he won't wear anymore. 0344 499 1000. Let's go to a more sobering subject, and this, of course, is what's happened in Birmingham, because there are big fears the bin strikes could spark similar disputes across the country. As negotiations appear to have stalled in this area, workers walked out over pay and conditions last month, saying the changes will leave them £8,000 worse off. Residents are reporting rats the size of cats among the waste, with one person, I don't know if you saw this, actually donning a rodent costume to confront councillors. Have a look and a listen to this.
I'm looking forward to going around, eating rubbish wherever I can see. I'm a Selly Oak rat, so in Selly Oak all the students litter all their rubbish and it doesn't get collected, and I'm very, very happy to be going around, eating their food, having lots and lots of babies with my wife, and really increasing the rat population in Birmingham.
By what date does the council think it will have reduced the backlog, reduced the rat population, and returned our streets to an acceptable state?
And there he was in full action, addressing councillors. I mean, it's when you see the scenes of rubbish piling up, it is beyond extraordinary. Let's speak with Councillor Timothy Huxtable, Shadow Cabinet Minister for Highways and the Environment at Birmingham City Council. Councillor Timothy Huxtable, good afternoon to you. So nice to have you with us. I mean, it is there's no way around this. It is a mess, and a dangerous mess at the moment.
It's a public health crisis, Ian, and I was there yesterday when the rat asked that question in the council chamber. Because I was seconding a motion from the Conservative group saying Birmingham needs to declare a public health emergency to deal with the rats and the rubbish that are piling up and we're being overrun with in Birmingham.
I mean, we're talking about 18,000 tonnes of rubber. I mean, this is, clearly...
21,000 tonnes.
21,000 tonnes.
21,000. That's the official figure we were told yesterday. 21,000 tonnes of uncollected waste. And we've actually had strike action from the beginning of January. So we're now over 3 months in. It's been the full-out strike by some of the bin workers since last month. But there's actually been industrial action since the beginning of January. And the number of bin bags piling up in our streets, uncollected waste, fly tipping, has just been escalating week upon week upon week.
Remind us, Timothy, if you could, because it's easy to lose sight of where these things or how these things began. What was the origins of this dispute? What are bin workers saying is the problem?
Well, the origin actually goes back 8 years because the Labour Council created the Waste Recycling and Collection Officer role, which they are now seeking to remove, and the unions are opposing the removal of this role. And ironically, it was put in place 8 years ago by the Labour Council in an attempt to avoid industrial action in the run-up to the local elections.
Right.
That's the irony. They actually caused the mess themselves, this Labour administration in Birmingham.
What's the way out of this? Is this just about giving some workers more money, or is there more to it?
There's more to it, and it's quite complicated because of equal pay legislation. But the City Council needs to get a handle on it. They need to allow those workers who are not striking to go out and to do their job. They need to allow those bin workers who are still working to be free from the intimidation and the harassment they are suffering. They need to make it clear that the new roles are going to be implemented and to give a deadline to which these new roles will come into place. They are now having to accept help from councils across the Midlands who are coming in to help Birmingham, including Conservative-led Lichfield, and there needs to be a concerted effort to clear up the 21,000 tonnes of uncollected waste, as well as the fly tipping that occurs. And what's more, Ian, is that for a couple of months now, all recycling collections have been suspended, all green waste collections have been suspended, and all bulk waste collections have been suspended in Birmingham. So very little is being collected across the board. And let us not forget that Birmingham has one of the lowest recycling rates of any local authority in the country, even before this action started. So I hate to think how low our recycling rates are now.
This is a picture that could get worse before it gets better, it seems, Timothy. What is the word on the street over there at Birmingham HQ? What's the intel telling you in terms of a resolution or a solution?
Well, as the opposition, we're obviously not part of the negotiations.
Indeed.
But all the residents are telling me they want this sorted. It's very important, obviously, for Birmingham to balance its books, but they want their waste, they want their recycling, they want their green and garden waste collected.
Yeah.
They don't want the smell of all the rubbish rotting in the streets, especially in this good weather. They don't want rats the size of cats, rats that are now biting residents, rats that are now chewing through car cabling and causing hundreds of pounds worth of damage to car owners. And I've had a constituent who's come to me and said, this is what has actually happened, and has shown me the cabling from their driveway that have been chewed by rats. It really is a horrendous experience, and 23 years of a councillor in Birmingham, never seen anything like it.
Never seen anything like it. And I guess I was just about
I've never seen a rat and ask a question at the City Council.
Well, indeed, yes. Maybe the first and the last time. Who knows? I was just thinking as well, Timothy, there's the other problem, of course, that fly tipping becomes an issue, doesn't it? Because there will be, unfortunately, some people who kind of see this as an opportunity to dump any old toot they fancy.
Yes, well, we have mobile household waste centres in Birmingham, and it's an opportunity for residents to come to a fixed point and to get rid of rubbish and bulk waste and whatever. We had over 300 tonnes dumped the night before one of these waste centres actually came. They couldn't collect everything on the day. I went back there in the evening and people were adding to the rubbish tip that was there already as I was actually there. I saw them pull up, take black bags out of their car and just add them to the pile. And the city council had to get one of these huge JCB digger trucks overnight at 4 a.m. the next morning just to clear what was left of the waste. And it was next to a park. It was next to a children's play area.
Nice.
And at one point, because I was there during the day, there were children in the play area who were blocked into that play area by the amount of black bags.
This is blocked in by rubbish. I mean, that's outrageous in itself. Listen, Timothy, thank you for your time, sir. If we do speak again, let's hope there's a resolution on this one. But he is Councillor Timothy Huxtable, Shadow Cabinet Member. He's in opposition to the Labour-run administration. He's Shadow Cabinet Member for Highways and the Environment at Birmingham City Council. It's grim. What do you say? 21,000 tonnes of crap, basically, out there on the streets, piling high, increasing by the day as the weather gets a little better. It's a bit chilly out there today, but it's not, you know, it's not raining. Clearly, you don't need much of a hike in temperatures for the old pong to really kick in as well. 0344 499 1000. This comes from Doc, who said, Winston, who says, the rape gang and subsequent cover-up hasn't affected me or my family, thank God, but I have 3 daughters. And if it had, I would probably be in prison for life by now for multiple murder. Anyone who'd had any part of it, covering it up or ignoring it or just turning a blind eye, but basically did nothing to help stop, if they knew or even suspected it was going on, should be sacked. No pension, put on trial for misconduct in a public office, imprisoned wherever applicable or possible, and named and shamed. No exceptions. They should also be made to apologise to everyone affected by this face to face, if that is what the survivors want. For Jess Phillips, of all people, says Winston, to now put a stop to these already diluted inquiries is an absolute disgrace. We need a full inquiry with statutory powers and a national crime agency to support to question and arrest whoever they need to in order to get to the bottom of this. It is a disgrace on our country. Bang on, Winston, on that. I couldn't have got any more accurate in how you've defined and articulated a very obvious point. I'm surprised there haven't been people who've taken the law into their own hands. I'm equally surprised, given the body of evidence. I said it a second ago, or half an hour ago. This isn't needles in haystacks. They're not going, we're starting from scratch. Oh, we're hearing rumours. You know, there's word on the street that there's some grooming gangs going around. We don't really know who the victims are or the perpetrators. We don't know anything about the people who covered it up. We know all this stuff. We know quite a lot about this. What we also want to get to the bottom of is how it was possible for this to be almost green-lit by authorities, how it could be that, I mean, I know I give this example a lot, but I don't know if they were a social worker, but they worked in, I think, some area of children's services where they flagged, this is years ago, that the ethnicity of these perpetrators, there was a commonality, there was all Pakistani men. I don't know whether this person mentioned their religion, but they certainly mentioned their ethnicity. And she was then sent on a race awareness course. Seriously. She was sent on you can't say things like that, sent on a race awareness course because she'd raised this issue. If you're investigating any kind of crime, then you look for, what are the things in common? We've got a grooming gang thing there, and there's some victims here, perpetrators. Is there any common thread between these people? I mean, like police at school day one, right? Yeah, well, they all happen to be from the same area, same religion. That may or may not be a factor, we don't know, but I think we should look at disproportionately, we seem to have quite a lot of men fitting the same MO in that respect, featuring, more than one facet of their being that is in common with each other. Would that not be fairly normal? I would have thought you'd at least flag that. This woman flagged it and got told she was a mad old racist. Better go on a course to sort you out. you dirty, filthy racist. Go on, get out of here. Well, no, I'm just telling you to get out with your racist potty mouth. Seriously, that's what we're dealing with here. But we know this stuff. Whoever was the person that sent her on the race awareness course should by now be in jail, OK, because you were part of the problem. It's those kind of characters we want to get to. Councillors who did nothing, law enforcement, any other area or agency that did absolutely naff all in this should all be in a dock somewhere, or at the very least be able to provide us with some kind of explanation as to how you can go deaf, dumb and blind when faced against the reality of, in your area alone, dozens if not hundreds of young girls who are victims of sexual abuse and rape. Didn't see anything, Governor. Wow. 0344 499 1000. 10 to 3, this is Talk.
This is right back to the old Labour ways of saying now is a good time to bury bad news. As everybody's leaving Parliament to go away, this is not the time. Then you make an announcement like this. It's so obvious. First of all, it's an abuse of Parliament. It's also an abuse of a really serious issue. I am putting down today a freedom of information request of the government to tell us what information did they receive from the councils that so made them change their policy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Adrian says Labour's refusal to carry out inquiries into the rape gangs demonstrates their hatred for the British people in facilitating a cover-up to help hide these vile parasites. They're happy to kill this country to get a certain set of votes. Bang on. There's no argument against that. That's not an opinion. That's a statement of fact from Adrian. That's exactly how this runs. See Jess Phillips for details. I mean, people who in any other walk of life were once, reasonably sane. You'd like to think so. Having met Jess many times, been on my show many times, becomes a government minister. And, of course, all that happened in the run-up to her election, it was a pretty ugly scene she was suffering. Well, she won't acknowledge any of that. They just can't do it. Do you ever hear Owen Jones, that creature, ever opine or talk about this subject? Never. I mean, maybe he has. I apologise if he has, and he's got very animated and upset about the massive injustice, but I bet you they can't go there. They cannot bring themselves. Half of these characters can't even condemn the Taliban, for God's sake, because they think it makes them some sort of racist. That's how mad. I mentioned the disease of socialism. It is an illness, all right? And I'm not being smart saying this. It's an illness, all right? But it defies any kind of logical interpretation. There's no intellectual kind of spin you could put on it. It's merely an emotional position to take. It gives you a nice warm feeling in the pit of your belly. It exists really in order to make you feel like you're a better person. And it's Hall of Mirrors stuff. It's completely false, ultimately very dangerous. And these are examples of where it's dangerous, because the characters we've got in charge just can't bring themselves to go there. No, we can't do this. We're talking about men that might be of another ethnicity, therefore they'll think we're racist, and that's not what we do, and we want social cohesion in our country, so please make it go away. So they made it go away. Victims, or the young girls, teenagers, some, not even teenagers, by the way. What about the... well, that's all right. Social cohesion, isn't it? This is Mary, who's somewhere in Cyprus. Hello, Mary.
Hello, Ian. We have spoken before.
Nice to have you with us. What have you got for us?
Well, it's really about the Birmingham business. I think my personal view is that it's got beyond what they're talking about, and the Ministry of Health should start getting involved, because otherwise there could be outbreaks of cholera, typhoid, Ebola, or whatever.
Well, you might think so. I mean, it can't. If there's 21,000 tonnes of rubbish, Mary, it can't be long before somebody starts to catch a cold, right?
Well, no, quite, and then it could end up like a COVID thing. And the hospitals won't be able to cope. I mean, I personally have had typhoid fever many years ago.
You're Typhoid Mary.
But I'd had the jabs, so I'm here to tell the tale.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you are. But you're right. I mean, there might be. I mean, there genuinely must be a public health emergency, surely, if you've got all that rubbish piled up.
I mean, I would have thought anybody with any common sense by this time would have realised that it's not the unions, just do something about it.
Do something about it. Wise words. But you see, that's common sense, Mary, and that doesn't play very well in the 21st century at the moment. Common has gone out the window, that. Mary, good luck. Thank you very much indeed for that. We can get a word in from Brenda in Manchester on the grooming gangs story. Brenda, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Oh, hi there.
Hello.
My thing is Jess Phillips. I've been a long time supporter and admirer of what she's done, and she wiped all that out yesterday. If she's got a shred of personal integrity left, she'll resign and say I was coerced into making that statement or whatever. But, she sold all them victims out by doing that. And I can't believe that she'd do that.
Well, she is also, and she's the minister for safeguarding women and girls, just to make it
not only that,
laughable.
If I was there, I wouldn't want to be seen in public or at dinner parties, because I'd look into the face of people and know it and know what they're thinking about me. I've got a price where I'm willing to sell out everything.
Well, this appears to be what happens with a certain colour of political party, in this case the Reds, the Socialists, that, you get to that position, and we've seen it with Ed Miliband, who in any other walk of life you would have sworn would have resigned because the government have reneged on their deals about the environment. They're expanding 2 airports, a few other bits and pieces. Cars as well. They're giving a little bit of leeway to hybrid cars. I think there's an oil-filled Qatar. That would be... And by the way, it's good that they're doing all of that, but if you're Ed Miliband, it's bad that they're doing all of that. So on principle, if you're Ed Miliband, you would resign. Jess Phillips has for years brilliantly spoken about the plight and problems and issues surrounding particularly domestic violence and other areas affecting young girls and women. And she's been a big voice on that, and thank goodness she's been there. I think most people from all sides of the House of Commons would never wish to dilute or in any way diminish the work she's done. But she becomes a minister with that title and then cancels the grooming gang inquiries, or certainly gives us the view that it's as good as. You can't make that up. Jess won't be sleeping well, you'd like to think, or maybe she will. 0344 499 1000. Thank you to Brenda as well for that. Vinny says, this is not my country anymore, I just live here. A few people feeling like that as well, Vin. More from you on the way. We, of course, will continue to take your calls and responses. Lots of subjects up and running, whether you're discussing Birmingham and the big rubbish heap. Is that going to be contagious? We will have more countries, more areas of the country doing the same. Details after the news.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
3 minutes after, I always say 3 minutes after, it's 2.5 minutes after the hour, after 3 o'clock. Good afternoon, welcome back to the home of common sense, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Real opinions flying around like billy-o at this end, nothing in any way glossed over with a veneer of what is supposedly acceptable. Real people having a chat. It's the only place you'll find it, a proper sounding board, a real conch for you to have your say. Lots to discuss. We continue in a similar vein. Labour being accused of abandoning victims after scrapping 5 grooming, count them, 5 grooming gang inquiries in favour of a flexible approach, whatever the heck that means, allowing councils to run their own reviews. We'll continue to take your calls on this, and we're also asking the, I hope not unreasonable question, what is behind Labour's reluctance to hold full-on grooming gang inquiries? More on that shortly. Also this afternoon, stock markets have plunged worldwide. This is Donald Trump's Liberation Day. Tariffs kicking in. China have fired back at 84%. It's like the Wheel of Fortune, this thing. It's getting mucky out there. Can it be circumnavigated? The Bank of England are warning of potential global financial crisis. The Bank of England are a bit like the OBR, aren't they? I mean, they say stuff, and I know they've got some very impressive brains that work in there, far cleverer than I will ever be, but I do think there's a little bit of a track record in some of these institutions of getting it horribly wrong. Details on that on the way. And Universal's first theme park in Europe is set to open in Bedfordshire by 2031, with the potential to generate 50 billion quid for the economy by 2055 and create 28,000 new jobs. You'd think that would be easy, wouldn't it, starting a theme park? Because it's always going to be busy. If you ever go to Legoland and Alton Towers, wherever you like, they're always busy. You can't get in the darn things, and they cost a fortune. I would have thought it's almost a license to print money. Looking forward to that. Details on the way. Everything you need to know. All the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. This one in from George in Dorset. The government does not work to secure the well-being of the population. Should the people bring a private prosecution funded by the people? This should apply to grooming gangs. Yeah, I like that idea. I don't know if there's any precedent for that. If you wanted to take the Prime Minister to court, it would be brilliant, wouldn't it? If you could do that, yeah, there's Keir Starmer in the dock. What's he accused of? Idiocy, Your Honour. Crimes of idiocy. That's what he's accused of. Have you seen this guy's track record? It's a hoot, I tell you. Have a look at the CV of doom. There's not a lot of good can come of this. Maybe somebody in the past has tried it, but yes, there is a lot of disquiet out there. On a wider area of British life, which, depending on who you talk to, the world is about to end because of tariffs. Others say, do you know what? This is recalibration time. This is going to turn out just as they would say over there across the pond. This is going to be mighty fine, and maybe it will. China hitting back with a trade war. They've slapped on 84% tariffs on US goods. This is after Donald Trump raised levies on Chinese imports. Now, stock markets, including the FTSE 100, have taken a bit of a dive. The Bank of England say the row could lead to a financial crisis. This comes as Elon Musk called Trump's trade advisor dumber than a sack of bricks, while Trump says countries are dying to make a deal. Let's try and dissect some of this. Let's get to the hub of what is happening. Michael Graham, our friend and regular who helps us out with these kind of areas, is, of course, the US political commentator, also managing editor of Inside Sources. Make sure you check out their website and stories. Michael, good afternoon to you. I'm doing my best here to try and work out. I think I've got it right. I think, yeah, that's what's happening. Trump's a genius. No, he's not a genius. He's a fool. Oh, hang on a sec. No, he's a genius. And I'm flip-flopping like this at the moment.
Well, the message from the White House is not mighty fine. The message from the White House is Saul Goodman.
Yeah.
So Saul Goodman.
Yeah.
Saul Good. Yeah. So look, who knows? That's all I got to say. Every time I think, oh, this is the dumbest thing ever, and you look at the stock markets, then the Republican who heads the Ways and Means Committee in Congress, which is where they do the tax, money stuff, he pointed out that small countries like Angola buy more of some of our dairy products like pork and chicken than the entire EU, which is just ridiculous,
Wow.
And it's because of the agricultural, the EU, as you know, you particularly the UK know, you have this agricultural wall that shall not be, breached, because the agriculture sector has a lot of political sway, and you see in Paris, France, the farmers protesting, and so you're going to have these both sides have strong motivations. Both sides have strong self-interest. And so what happens when they clash? Usually somebody wins, somebody loses. The idea for trade is that you find a way where everybody wins some and loses some, and maybe that's a path forward. And, this is what the Trump people will say. If we get to Christmas and Americans feel good about the economy, they're buying more stuff that says Made in America on it. They meet at the, Thanksgiving dinner table, or at the Christmas dinner table, or at the, Hanukkah party, and people going, my cousin just got a job. They're building a new chips factory where he lives. My wife, she got. Then that'll be, a win. And whatever the turbulence now, it won't matter, because you'll be about a year ahead of the election, and people will be feeling good going into the election year. If the wheels come off, and Republicans are at Thanksgiving trying to explain why the higher prices and the lower, jobs numbers are good, then that's really bad news, particularly because midterm elections, when we have the president, and then 2 years later, the president's not up again, and then the president's up, so every 4 years is the president. In between those elections, the party that controls the White House tends to do really badly anyway. So you've already got a year that's not looking great for Republicans. This could make it even worse.
Yeah. So it's the turkey test, as I think we can now call it.
Yeah.
If your turkey costs $750, and that's just for a leg, then you realise that the wheels have come off, maybe.
But you know what? But if there's a number that says this year's Thanksgiving dinner is 15 cents more than last year's, and almost all of that 15 cents went to domestic producers.
Sure.
Because then people I think are going to say, well, I don't want to pay more, but it's not very much more, and Buy America's good, and the overall the economy's good, and and there's also something else, and I think I'm curious if you agree with this. When you're in a time like this, just like you were in the middle when Brexit first happened, polling is almost meaningless. There's too much turmoil, you know what I mean, right in the moment. So for the first couple of months after Brexit actually happened, polling was just ridiculous. But there have been 2 polls that I've seen that show that people in the reddest, more rural parts of the country like what's happening. They don't care about Wall Street. Even if they do have their retirement funds there, they don't see a direct connection.
Sure.
They feel left out, and so they feel like someone's trying to help me. And so obviously at some point, if it doesn't work and you don't help them, they're going to pay a price. But right now there are people, we've called them the forgotten man here for a long time. They're the people that when America stopped making TVs, they were at the factory in Michigan, and they feel like they got left out of global trade. And sure, it helped 70% of Americans, but it did hurt 30, and they feel like Trump's on the side of the 30.
Yeah. We've got over here the Bank of England saying there could be a financial crisis. Whenever I think, do you remember the 2 old boys in Trading Places?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like, I always think of those 2 guys when I think of the back, sitting there in some oak panelled room in big winged chairs going, what do you think, Carruthers? I reckon it's going to be a crisis, my man. Really? I'll bet you $1 it's not. Or blah, blah, blah. It doesn't always get it right. And we do find ourselves... lots of bodies, and I'm sure it's the same in the States, who have impressive names with impressive people, and they've got, Oxbridge and Harvard degrees coming out of their ear holes. You tend to think, when I was a kid, these people are the geniuses. It's when you get older you realise these guys get it wrong quite a lot.
Right. And so, by the way, I'm trying to think of the name of the brothers in that movie. My wife is going to punish me for not knowing because she's a huge fan of that movie. But, there's several aspects. Number one, there are a lot more people in the U.S. who do have a connection to the stock market and to investments like that because they have a 401k, that's their retirement. And so they get a statement at the end of the month, and it's, oh my gosh, that's a real thing. On the flip side, you make a good point. Why did the collapse happen in 2007, 2008? Because these super geniuses were totally wrong, and they were having the government subsidize mortgages that never should have been made in the name of political diversity and DEI. Why did the fiasco with COVID happen, and why were we lied to? Why right now there's a news story in the last 24 hours about data the Biden administration had about people with COVID early on that they sat on and on. You look at all these. You look at how bad we now know our public schools are. The experts told us they were great. Now we know how bad they were. There are 50 journalism. Journalists told us they were super smart. We should just listen to them. Now we know they were lying. They lied about Biden, or they were too dumb to see what we all saw. So the elite class is in real trouble, and I think that's giving Trump some more running room. Still, at some point there has to be money in my wallet, jobs in my neighborhood.
Sure.
Prices have to be, what I want to pay. And if that doesn't happen, there is no way to talk your way out of this. And that's the reality where we are.
Indeed. And some breaking news. Randolph and Mortimer Duke.
The Duke brothers.
That's them.
Yes, absolutely. Turn the machines back on. It's an absolutely great.
Oh, it's an absolute stunner. I now want to watch it. I saw it. I think I've probably watched that movie more than maybe any other, but not for a little while.
I had the chance to meet Dan Aykroyd a few years ago, and I asked him, "What's the one scene you shot that you would want to see?" And he said, "You kidding me? Jamie Lee Curtis." Trading Places. Are you crazy?
We remember.
He's like, he couldn't believe I even asked that question.
We remember that well. Goodness me.
Yes, absolutely.
That's.
I got time for a question for you.
Please.
So Trump has a thing that he can point to that he's doing really well. And that is immigration. It's working very great. People, it's uncovering how bad the universities were, the borders were. Does the government in power in the UK right now have something to point to?
Let me go to my Starmer's doing well file. Hang on one second, just a minute. It's just under. Where is it? There it is. I've got it here. Let's have a little look. Somewhere. No, nothing.
What I love is you manage to reach into your trash can spontaneously and not make the liquor bottles in there clink together to reveal what's going on.
I took a risk there. I took a hygiene risk. All
but
manner
one
of
bottle of
things
gin
could have
is
been
easy
in
to
there.
cover. It's the two. I know you're a 2-bottle man by this time
Always
of the day.
two, always two. Yeah, it could have had Mike Graham's toenails in there because he likes. He goes for an 8 a.m. clipping, you see, but he has.
So
people
what's your beverage? What is your beverage of choice when you are doing an adult beverage? What is your?
If I was having a drink, I tell you what, I do. Like after work today, I'm going to have a beer. I know I'm going to have.
So
a
what are
beer.
you going to have? Sammy Smith?
Well, here's the problem in this country. We're a country of lager drinkers rather than... I mean, people do drink fine ales that have really weird names, like the Speckled Cock and stuff like that. I'm not kidding. And
do you have a penicillin shot to go with that afterwards?
Yeah, I think you
probably. I think so.
Yeah, you really do need one of those round here. But yes, so I do tend... I'm quite a cheap date in that respect. I like a glass of vino, though.
Well, I will tell you the one thing Trump can do to lose me forever. I drink Bushmills Irish whiskey every day. It's the greatest fluid ever made on planet Earth. And if the tariffs start driving up the cost of my daily Bushmills, we're going to have a problem.
Yeah, well, I understand that Irish whiskey is more expensive now than Scottish whiskey because of
Irish whiskey's better because I don't like peat. So if you don't like peat, you're not going to like Scotch. And plus, Bushmills, they've been making the license to distill goes back to 1604. So think about it. Even if you stink at something, 400 plus years of practice is going to get pretty good.
Yeah. You'd think so. You'd think so.
You'd think so. Well, I think they've done an outstanding job myself. But Irish across the board. I'm an Irish whiskey drinker, and please do not make my Irish whiskey go up.
Yeah. Otherwise, there will be rumbles.
I'll be in the streets. I'll be drunk and in the streets.
The Hill will never have seen carnage like it.
Exactly.
Graham's out.
Exactly. You thought January 6th was bad? You wait.
You wait till you see this. Michael Graham
the Irish whiskey out
without
of my
his
cold dead
tipple.
Fingers.
Outrageous stuff. Yeah. Listen, Michael, as ever, thank you. It's always brilliant to have Michael Graham on with us, US political commentator. He is our man on Capitol Hill, managing editor at Inside Sources. Over to you on what he had to say. 0344 499 1000. Some comments coming in on grooming gangs and the other big stories. This in from Lorraine, who says Jess Phillips has capitulated in one of the biggest cover-ups Britain has ever seen. Any independent investigation would uncover numerous individuals within councils, police, education, social services and Parliament who knew, were involved and protected these monsters. This scandal cannot be swept under the carpet. They must all be held accountable. I note it doesn't even make the BBC headlines. Jess Phillips has sacrificed these vulnerable white girls on the altar of her paycheck. She is shameless and has no moral compass. This is Labour. They are simply bad. And you just hit on something, Lorraine, that I thought was interesting. When a story breaks, when you do what we do for a living, you often have a little look through how other areas are reporting it. So you might look at how the Sun are reporting it compared to the Telegraph, for example. So when this story happened with Jess Phillips, my go-to place, for the very reasons that were absolutely confirmed the minute I went there, was the BBC website. I thought, this is going to be interesting because this is a pretty big job, a pretty big story. I'll check out the BBC website. And there it is. I'm looking at it now. They've got the Universal Studios story on there. They've got the Trump tariffs, Prince Harry stepping back from... Maybe if I just click on UK, I might get what I'm looking for here. I've got infected blood victims. I'm glad that's being reported. Wildfires in Northern Ireland. Ex-snooker champion is in the news for not particularly pleasant reasons. No, it's not under UK. I mean, this cost millions to run, this website. So maybe I've got to hone it down to England. Maybe it's England. Let's see what I get there. Adventurers Trek claim ignorant, says Islanders. No, I've got Asian Hornets. I've got a story about Paddington. I've got a story about a cinema ban on kids and the Minecraft story. I've got nothing on this. In fact, I can't find anything on this story on the BBC News website. Of all places, you might think you would find a story would be on the state-funded BBC News website that can afford to put stories on there that there might be a newspaper somewhere. The Daily Star would probably go, it's not really the sort of thing we would put on the front page, because it wouldn't do justice to the story, because we are more frivolous in the way we approach things. And I get that. They're allowed to. They're a commercial outfit. They know their audience, and they put on front pages and inside pages what would be better for them. But the BBC, absolutely naffle. 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. Back to you in a couple of moments. This is Talk.
This is right back to the old Labour ways of saying now is a good time to bury bad news. As everybody's leaving Parliament to go away, this is not the time then you make an announcement like this. It's so obvious. First of all, it's an abuse of Parliament. It's also an abuse of a really serious issue. I am putting down today a Freedom of Information request of the government to tell us what information did they receive from the councils that so made them change their policy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
One comes in here from Trevor, who says, do you remember Admiral? They used to sponsor loads of football clubs, says Trevor. Admiral. There was Admiral Insurance. There still is, isn't there? They still exist. Is there another Admiral? It half rings a bell, but it's such a popular name that I might be misthinking something. This in from John in Germany. I still wear Lyle & Scott turtleneck with Sergio Tacchini jumper and Kappa trainers with a lilac pair of Farris. I look like Del Boy's love child, hoping fashion turns full circle. Nothing wrong with that. Ian, is it Birmingham or Birmingham? Says Keith. And that's very good, actually. Why has nobody else said that about the rubbish piling up? Birmingham or Birmingham? It's a good point. I'm sure that headline must have been written somewhere. If not, I'm sure the headline writers are ready to go. Let's talk to Ian, who's down in London. Ian, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Just going back on what you said with Admiral. Admiral was the sportswear that sponsored England football shirts when Hoddle was playing.
Oh, Admiral, yes, was there dots on it? There was...
Yes, it had like a sort of sailors, like a captain or...
Yes,
Admiral.
it did, that Admiral, yes.
And when you talk about Capiche and all of that, that was my family's background, all menswear with Sergio Tacchini, Capiche and all that lot. But anyway... Wow. Come away from that.
I've just, by the way, I've just literally that second looked up Admiral, and they are a sports company that still exists.
Yeah, they actually sponsored England for years. Anyway.
They did. I can see Kevin Keegan wearing that shirt with it on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's go to more sobering and more serious matters.
Yeah, unfortunately, the real problem when you were speaking with Theo earlier on, and you were saying about the repercussions towards Labour and everything else, for the areas that it's in, a lot of the communities will not do anything. They're not going to suddenly go and vote Reform or vote Conservative or anything. They will stick to their own because they will say locally, it's all a load of rubbish. It's just being done by the right wing. Our boys are as good as gold. We do nothing.
Yep.
And in the local council elections, it'll be the same thing. Oh, you know, so-and-so, he's fantastic. Do you think he'd be involved in that cover-up? Never. That's why the whole thing with it, with Jess Phillips standing up yesterday and with Yvette Cooper and, like, even the other one, the deputy, Angela Rayner, right? She goes around and everything else, she'll say, no, you're wonderful, we're wonderful. And this is the whole thing. It will get swept under the carpet. They think bad, what is it, like Victor Ratner said, like, bad things will never affect us. Correct. You know, and that's the sort of thing. It will go like that, and it will try to be forgotten, but it will carry on day in, day out, year in, year out. And you can be sure it's still going on now, and they'll still cover it up. They do nothing, and this is why it had to be independent. My only problem with that is, you know, with all the top judges and everything else, they let off this one that comes in the country because his kid doesn't want nuggets and all that. So how can you trust them?
Well,
you trust them to do the
you have to take
investigation?
You have to take nugget dietary requirements very seriously, Ian. Frankly, I'm disappointed you're not on board with it.
I wish I was. Now, maybe I wouldn't. I'd lose a bit of weight.
There is that. Listen, great call, Ian. Thank you very much indeed for that. Lovely to speak. Let's go to Barry in Milton Keynes on the same issue. What have you got for us, Barry? Hi.
Hi, Ian. Just on your question there about the grooming gangs and why Labour's covering it up. Well, I mean, let's talk about the elephant in the room. The fact is that they're trying to cover up their own MPs. So the thing is, this is one of them investigations where either their MPs or what have you, it's like a scandal like Watergate. In other words, it's whoever it is, either the police or what have you, they're complicit or indicated in it. I mean, you've had likes of Tommy Robinson and what have you that have actually brought light to this issue.
Yeah.
And, you know, at the end of the day, it's literally this, you know, they're covering their own, you know, and also they're covering for the Muslim vote as well. Because the fact is, you look, it's Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs, yeah? And if they get away with this, you know, which they are, because Labour's covering it all up, it's going to just spread further. I mean, the thing is, you've got that Tar Mahir, his name is from Birmingham, the MP there, lovely bloke, yeah. And 20 other of his kin trying to get an airport done over in Kashmir in Pakistan, where this sort of thing is actually common over there. So what?
I mean,
it's line to us from there.
It defies, you know, it kind of defies belief, really, that we're even having this conversation. Because if you were having this conversation 30 years ago, people just wouldn't believe that this was possible. Look, a few people went to jail, but these inquiries should surely throw up hundreds of people going to jail, Barry, and not just the perpetrators, because, of course, that's not the only offence here, right? You've got
exactly. Well, the thing is, we shouldn't even be talking about this.
No, we shouldn't.
Like you said, 30 years ago.
It's mental that we're talking about this. Who on earth would go? You know, anyone would say, "Well, hey, you need the biggest inquiry ever." Surely, you throw everything at it.
And the thing is, normally, on a normal day, it would be expected sort of thing.
Yeah. You might think so. Barry, great call. Passionate stuff. Thank you for that. Amanda, also another chapter in the book of how the world has gone utterly bonkers. Who would have thought the day would come when a man dressed as a rat takes part in a council meeting? He probably wasn't thrown out, as it was assumed. He was identifying as a rat that day. Sheer lunacy. Yeah, it wasn't. They probably thought, well, we can't throw him out if that's his gender identity. He sees himself as a rat. We've got to keep him as a rat. On a lighter note, it is nice to once in a while just read some lighter ones. Karen says, how about Reebok classics? Yeah, we didn't really mention Reebok, did we, in the big list? I mentioned Gola as well, or is it Gola or Gola? Adam, our producer, who's from Australia, wasn't familiar with Gola. We did look it up. It is English. It's based in Leicester, formed in 1905. So it's been going around for a long time. I don't know how global it's got. It's clearly never made it down under, that's for sure. And if anybody was going to wear, you know, a tasty pair of things on their feet, it's our Adam. I mean, he only wears one on one foot, but, you know, he knows how to rock with that one-footed trainer, whatever you call it. Trainer or sneaker? There's another one. Trainer? Sneaker, yeah. And that's a very Americanism, a very American thing, isn't it? But don't Australians say thongs? Yeah, you can't call flip-flops thongs. Show us your thongs. That just... That's all shades of wrong. Get arrested. This one in from Karen. My response to the government's response to child rape gangs. Wow, just bloody wow. How low will they stoop to hang on to votes, throwing vulnerable girls under the bus to save their own skins? It is that sense of... When we read about these stories, you kind of... If you're not involved, naturally there is a distance. You can only try and be an objective onlooker and apply some sort of common sense. But once in a while you do have that moment of, God, if I was either the victim or the parent of a victim, how would I feel about this? If I thought that we'd gone to the local authority and said there's a house there at number 68 where we know there are men on a regular basis who are taking young girls in. They're all middle-aged men, and they're taking young girls in. Well, you wouldn't even have to prove why they were taking young girls. And the fact that young girls of 13, 14 were turning up at a house that is full of adult males would be enough. Even if they were playing flipping tiddlywinks, you'd investigate, right? You'd go, well, that's a bit weird. Well, how often do they do this? Every night? Or just there? No, there's actually dozens of... Really? Councils knew about that stuff. Local authorities had that stuff reported to them on a regular basis. Social workers, cops turning up saying, you know, young lady, what are you doing? You're a bit drunk. Whoa, okay, that might not be desirable at 13 or 14 years old. I think the greater story is, why has a 13-year-old come out of a house that's got 5 middle-aged men in it? Don't you want to be investigating that bit? Some say in this area, some of these men were kind of community leaders. They were almost running the gaff, to coin a phrase. Whatever the reason, have a flipping inquiry. We can get to the bottom of all of this. Is anyone telling me with a straight face you don't want to get to the bottom of this? You don't want to address these issues? 0344 499 1000. Just gone 3:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Neil says Labour has no excuse for not launching a public inquiry except they can't afford it. Yeah, I mean, that would be more honest, wouldn't it? They say, look, do you know what? We literally can't afford this. I don't think these things have to take that long. I mean, look, you want them done properly. I know there's loads of different tentacles and facets to these big inquiries, and, you know, so there should be. They need to be thorough. They need to be done seriously. You can't just hire in Bilbo Baggins, the lawyer, who's going to, you know, give it a go. You need somebody who knows their turf. But the idea of these things take so long seems extraordinary. Now, the UK will be home to Europe's first universal theme park. Yeehaw. Planned for a former brickwork site in Bedford, or near Bedford. This is a 476-acre complex expected to create 28,000 jobs, opening in 2031, and could draw 8.5 million visitors every year. Keir Starmer visited Bedfordshire this morning and said the multi-billion-pound deal will bring growth, jobs, and, of course, joy to Britain. Here he is.
And it's not just the first one in the United Kingdom. That would be pretty good. It's the first one across Europe, and that is really incredible. And it's going to put Bedford on the map for millions of people, film lovers, people coming here for fun, people building their careers here. It'll create thousands of jobs for the local community. And the statistic for that is really impressive. 80% of the jobs are going to be local jobs.
Oh, wow. I wish he'd put a Disney outfit on or something to make that announcement. Just a pair of big kind of ears might have worked. Let's speak with Anita Mendirata, tourism expert and consultant. Anita, nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
Listen, I mean, this is big news, right? Anytime a big theme park opens, wherever it is, it's big. What took them so long?
Oh, it's a long process because the negotiation has to go through naturally with the contracting company, so that very much being Comcast and bringing the Universal brand to the UK, and exactly as the Prime Minister said, to Europe. So ultimately it's a regional win. Yeah. And then you naturally have to engage with the local communities to make sure that they're very much supporting of it and see the benefits for themselves. So it must be a win-win-win for the UK government, for Bedford, and for Universal theme parks.
Indeed. And I mean, I always think, and I'm sure there's lots of evidence to the contrary here, but, you know, I was in Disney in Florida last year, been to, you know, the Lego lands in various places and the like. You always, when you go in as a visitor, you know, it's almost cheaper to just eat the money, isn't it? Because it's expensive to buy, you know, everything from a burger to the entrance fee is pretty, you know, it's pretty up there. So you tend to think this is a license to print money. If I wanted to make money and I had the cash, I'd open one of these theme parks. I'm sure the people that own them will say, do you know what? It ain't quite as easy as you think, because the running costs of this are absolutely vast. Our profits are about 1% of everything that comes in. I'm sure there is another story to it, but nonetheless, it must be lucrative in that world of theme parkery.
It's lucrative, however, to your point, there's a massive investment that needs to go up front. And this is a time when people are not necessarily comfortable making significant investments that are reliable on disposable income. And as we know, we're all becoming much more economically sensitive on our spend. The beauty about this, however, is recognizing from a UK perspective, this is spectacular news. Because when you look at the fundamentals of a tourism economy, which the UK very much is, it really does help in terms of strategic building the UK in tourism, because it's pushing people out of the main cities, London, for instance. It's getting people back year-round, which is brilliant, and it's bringing in repeat visitation to a place that normally wasn't likely to get that many people. It also supports the ROI on Luton Airport expansion. So there are so many reasons why this model works well, but exactly to your point, to the core investor, so Universal, ultimately, they needed to make sure that they had a partner they could could trust. So this is a real sign of confidence for the UK government, being one that ultimately a brand and an organisation like Universal recognises it's worth the partnership risk. Yeah. It's worth investing because we'll be able to bring in travellers who are already coming to the UK, one of the most desired destinations in the world, but also those who are visiting Europe. It's easy enough to now hop across to the UK and expand the beauty of visiting the UK by going to Bedford to Universal theme parks.
It's going to take 6 years to build this thing. Indeed. You know, I could have done that in one, I reckon.
I would ask you to run across to Harry Potter's studio tour, grab his magic wand and see if you can do it. Yeah. But you've mentioned an important part, because ultimately the construction is bringing 20,000 new jobs alone. Then on top of that, you have the people who will be ultimately operating the theme park ongoing, which is another about 8,500, 9,000 jobs. So that construction phase is long, because the quality needs to be ensured for safety and for Universal brand. But it's bringing in a huge amount of skills development. And that's a good thing right now. I think importantly, Ian, it's been wonderful to watch the news today. People finally have some good news for a change. It's been real good to have a good news story. And then that one that doesn't inspire a little bit of fun and a smile. So in today's days of very heavy headlines, this is a wonderful breath of fresh air. And thank you to the UK government and Universal for that.
100%. You're right on that point. Listen, great to have you on, Anita. Thank you for your time. Anita Mendirata, tourism expert and consultant. I've never, even as a kid, I wasn't massive on the theme park thing. There was something, I think I found them a bit intimidating. I've never done the the big roller coaster things. Oh, get in the bin. I don't want to do that kind of caper no more than I want to parachute out of a plane naked. I mean, it just seems like a very risky thing to do. Not into all of that. So, yeah, it's fun watching the kids, lark around. I've done Legoland more times than I can remember. Clearly it's impressive at a level. These things didn't really exist in any form when I was a kid. Well, the Disneys did, in California and Florida. Euro Disney wasn't there, or Disneyland Paris, whatever it's called this week, that wasn't there. What did we have? In the nearest to us was a place called Dreamland in Margate, which had a roller coaster, and then it got a new roller coaster called the Looping Star, which was a big sort of localised story, the Looping Star. It was taken over by, I think, a Dutch company, and then was called Bembom Brothers, which didn't really, Dreamland it's back to being Dreamland, I think. Dreamland kind of sounded like the place you wanted to go, and it had, the tubs of, the little tubs you float through the tunnels on, and the arcades, and it had loads. That was quite exciting to go to, but I always felt it was a bit the sort of amusement parks and the like are kind of classically very cliched scenes of stuff happening, aren't they, in movies? So maybe it's that. Maybe I'm scarred by an old episode of Columbo or something. The Haunted House, all of that caper. I liked those bits of these things, just not the big rides. My sister would jump on that pirate ship thing, that thing that just kind of goes round and you think it's coming off. That's coming off. It's one bolt away from coming off. But it is good news. It is genuinely a bit of good news. If a massive theme park, if this country has been chosen as that, it will create loads of jobs. And I'm sure if you go to Universal in Bedfordshire, it will be an amazing day out in 6 years' time. Back to your calls. Janice is in Clacton-on-Sea. On this very point, Janice, what have you got for us?
Oh, right. Well, I'm excited about this for our country.
Yeah.
But I'm worried. Because this deal was obviously done on the Conservatives. It's now been obviously signed, sealed, delivered.
Yes.
But we've got Miliband. And I don't trust the man. It's going to take 5-6 years. They're going to go hell full of it to build it. Where's the power going to come from? And when it is built, where's the power coming from?
It's a good point. The thought of going down the roller coaster and looping the loop 100 times based on solar power might be a bit disturbing.
Yeah. Well, I think if Universal were to do this deal now, they'd run for the hills, called Hollywood.
Hollywood Hills indeed. Janice, I love it. Thank you very much indeed for that. Claire says, we've just come back from 4 days in Benidorm for our friend's 50th. While we were there, we visited my brother-in-law who lives in a camper Villamar. Ground rent is 5,000 quid a year, electric 50 quid a month, and just buy a gas bottle when the old one runs out. Everything you need on a site, including a subsidised clubhouse. So cheap drinks, 4 swimming pools. Safe to say we're all planning on joining him as soon as possible. I don't recognise our country anymore, says Claire in Buckley. That sounds a bit tasty, doesn't it? So ground rent is 5,000 quid a year. Camping Villamar. Who lives on Camping Villamar. Is that a place? Sorry, is Camping Villamar a place, or is it a method of camping that I'm not familiar with? I'm going to look it up in the next break. Yeah, I've said this for a long time. If you take caravan parks, I mean the really tasty ones that have got like the mobile homes in them, you know, when everybody gets in one of those things, they always go, oh, I could just buy one of these, because it's like a miniature thing. If everything's got a nice kitchen, everything's there, it's just a little smaller. It's kind of like a weird world that you've sort of arrived in. And, you know, the bed is, you know, the wall. You pull something down and a bed pops up, and, you know, you stick your foot on a switch somewhere and a wardrobe opens. But all of that. And they are, I mean, I'm sure that's not the same thing that Claire's describing, but places that you could live in cheaply. That, to me, has to be the future of housing, doesn't it? And by the way, on that point, round the corner from me, about 6 weeks ago, 6-7 weeks ago, I noticed what was essentially in what I thought was somebody's garden. The fence had been torn down and there were some foundations were built, and not massive, not small either. And the concrete foundations, they obviously also put in plumbing and electrics ready to go. So I walked the dog this way, so I'm waiting to see the dog, and I'm waiting to see the building go up as I'm walking the dog. At some point, I thought in the summer they'll start building. I go past there yesterday. Bear in mind, I go past there on Monday, and this concrete thing is there. I go past there 2 days later, this morning, and there's a house there. There's a flipping house there. I'm thinking, that's just magic. It was a concrete slab, a foundation. Now there's a house there. And of course it was a prefabricated house, purchased, as I'm now told, by, I think, Poland. And it's up. I mean, it's not livable yet. There's still stuff to do to it. The prefab construction, essentially 4 walls and a roof. And a load of guys had come along with a big old crane and a big old truck, and they had vans there apparently for the whole day and a bit more besides. They'll still have to do some plastering and electrics, but the point is a house went up. Now obviously it still had to be constructed in the factory to the requirements of the owner. But is that the future as well? Is the prefab thing, prefabricated? It's like a flat pack house. You know, it was like it had come from IKEA, but it was a house. Utterly extraordinary. Is that not a way or an area that they would look at? Because we are clearly stuffed when it comes to housing. There must be a solution. It cannot be beyond the wit of mankind. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
This is right back to the old Labour ways of saying now is a good time to bury bad news. As everybody's leaving Parliament to go away, this is not the time then you make an announcement like this. It's so obvious. First of all, it's an abuse of Parliament. It's also an abuse of a really serious issue. I am putting down today a freedom of information request of the government to tell us what information did they receive from the councils that so made them change their policy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. And I was just looking up Camping Villamar, reference Claire in Buckley's message that she sent to us about her brother who lives over there. I mean, it looks, wow. I guess there's different types of accommodation, but if you want to live in a little bit more sunshine, then that's surely the place to do it, isn't it? Take your van down there, or however, or whatever form of accommodation can be offered. Gary says, all of these people still wearing Ticini and Lyle and Scott sweaters should get themselves over to Birmingham, where the council has got a bit of a 1970s vibe going on. They would, that's right, then go over to the local pub for a double diamond before settling down to watch the Sweeney of an evening. I like it. Jacob in Milton Keynes, how you doing?
Yeah, hi, I'm on Easter holidays, a little break from school. Just wanted to talk about the theme park.
Yes.
Being a local person to the area, I think it's great news. And this morning, the mayor of Bedford, Tom Wootton, I think his name, he was being interviewed, and he was kind of dropping a hint that they're in negotiations to have Eurostar coming up here, because he mentioned that we're going to have we're trying to get trains from very far away places coming up to the local area. So that it's good for jobs, all that sort of thing, Yeah, weekend in Paris, all of that.
Do you sense that? I mean, I can't really see a downside with this. I mean, there's no, this hasn't been Keir Starmer's brilliance. This has been in negotiations for a couple of years, but it's a theme park, right? What's not to like about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I can't see a downside to it. But having said that, they're going to have to maintain roads, Bedford, the local towns, etc., around here. They're going to have to, knock up a few hotels very quickly because of all the footfall.
That's also true, isn't it? Because you're always going to increase. There's going to be a knock-on effect as well to all of this. So in that respect, I like it. Are you a theme park kind of person?
No. I mean, I'm with you. I'm being a teacher, I have to take kids to them sort of for the end of term trip. But,
of course.
And then they'll always say to me, "Sir, do you want to come on with us?" And I say, "No, I'll just stand here and off an ice cream. You lot can go on it."
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, go and get some sugary donuts or something while everybody else is giving it large on the roller coaster. Jacob, great call. Thank you for that. Henry in Sheffield says, in Sheffield, our bin men are on strike. They are bizarrely not in dispute with the management directly, but with another union who the Strike Happy Union Unite say that the management shouldn't talk to. So they're on strike days. On strike days, we get the other unions' workers empty our bins. That's mad, isn't it? Marie says residential caravan parks are absolutely everywhere now. England sounds more expensive than Spain on ground rent. Well, again, this is really just about, is there a way to get accommodation going quicker? Just back to quite a lot of comments coming in on prefabricated homes. I'm sure they're not completely cheap if you get a good one, and they're not going to have the same style or character that you would get if you were building from scratch with bricks and mortar. I get that. A mate of mine just around the corner from the house I'm talking about is literally building his own house. It's a tasty one as well. He's thrown a few quid into this thing. It looks good. It looks like it'll have character. It has, you know, it has walls that have curves in them. It's got all of that. Round the corner, this prefabricated one that's just gone up is a heck of a lot smaller, and it is just a square box. It'll look nice when all this panelling going on the outside, wooden panel. It'll be rendered in some kind of way. They'll stick a nice front door on it. It's great. I'm not talking only about the aesthetics, though. I'm talking about solving the housing crisis. And if you want to build homes cheaper, is prefab the way to go? Again, they still have to be built. They're not instant, but once they're built, bang, those suckers are up. Our lines are open. Jeremy Carr's going to be here shortly. We'll chat to Jezza before the news to find out what's happening. This is Matt in Cheshire, who I think gets a final word this afternoon. Matt, good afternoon to you.
Hi, good afternoon, Ian. I hope you've got a glorious day like we have.
Yeah, well, it's not bad. It's a bit chilly, though, today.
Chilly this morning, chillier, but it's amazing again now.
Yeah, it's all right. Happy to hear it. Just right weather for a pint, yeah?
I think so, yeah, maybe about 6 o'clock, maybe.
I think you're going to say about 6 pints. That may also... well, that might also be true. Here, see.
that would be asleep by 9 or something.
100%. Yeah, the days of doing that are well gone. But anyway, yeah. What are your thoughts, Matt? What have you got for us?
There was a guy called Ivor Kaplan, a former Labour MP, that was arrested a few months ago. Then there was a guy arrested at weekend, a Labour MP.
Yeah.
It's not a stretch now to imagine that there's something going on. This might be the explanation as to why they're hiding and trying to avoid the grooming gangs.
Well, I mean, we should say, by the way, getting arrested doesn't mean anybody is guilty and people are innocent. No, I know you didn't. I'm just making that point. It is. I don't think it's in their DNA, Matt, to want to look too deeply into this stuff for a variety of reasons.
Well, one, there's the voter aspect, the Muslim vote. Then there's the sort of... I think there was a part of the trans movement that was talking about child. It's okay to sort of fancy children and stuff. There's some really deranged things going through the minds.
There is some bizarre elements to left-wing thinking that does touch onto all of those things. Or it could just be the fact that they cannot countenance the idea that anything might challenge social cohesion. I mean, that's where my money is on this, Matt. But listen, we hit the clock. Thank you, Matt in Cheshire. And I crossed to Jeremy Carr just after he stuffed a wafer in his gob.
Do you like these wafers?
I do like them.
Here, I'll pass them to you.
Yeah.
You have the other 4.
Did you get... Well, I'm going to have 4.
Yeah,
that's half of them.
That's all right, I've had half. How are you?
I'm all right. Yeah, it's been very busy this afternoon.
The greatest... Did you hear Mike this morning dealing with this new UK theme park? Did you hear his idea of rides?
Go on.
You know, the migrant log flume that doesn't get to the other side.
Yes, I did,
and the Rachel Reeves roller coaster that just doesn't go up, it goes down the whole time. And the Miliband ride that runs out after 5 seconds because it's got no energy. It's fantastic.
I love that.
What's been big then, apart from obviously your
We have been talking about the grooming gang inquiries that are not happening. A sort of watered down version.
I dropped that at 5:15. Honestly, that is the most... In my humble opinion, to do that with 45 minutes to spare without giving Parliament the chance is disgusting. They turned down a national independent inquiry, now not even locals. And I've been a big fan of Jess Phillips, but she doesn't get a buy from this. It's disgusting.
100%.
If she was the person I believe she was, when you talk about what she's done with stalking and women's rights, she should have resigned on principle that this government... You know why they're not doing it, don't you?
Go on.
Because they're terrified of losing the Muslim
vote.
Indeed, let's not lie about that. People go, how can you say that? Because it's true.
But it also challenges their philosophical kind of idea that, you know, everything's this harmonised area where we all rub along nicely.
No, there are girls being raped.
Ideas.
Let's not call them a grooming gang.
100%. They're rape gangs.
And it's disgusting, man. And the priorities, we were just doing Plank of the Week, and there's a council that will get you to fill out a form to see whether you get white privilege. And if you answer, yes, I'm a white man, you get 15 points, and that's a bad score.
And if you had stories read to you when you was a kid, that puts you as a middle class.
If you had stories read to you when you was a kid.
When you was a kid.
I think you need to go back. Where was you from? Down there in Somerset, was it?
Sound like Jethro, didn't
I thought you were... well, I remember him. Do you remember Jethro?